Sunlight poured across the Dutch countryside like a blessing that had forgotten this was a war. I felt it on my face the instant the Dakota's side door yawned open, a sudden wash of fresh air carrying the smell of fields, green, damp, strangely sweet. The roar of the engines blended with the whistle of wind as I shuffled to the edge, boots heavy with gear, parachute lines dancing against my knees. My heart had been thudding since England, a steady drum under my webbing. But here at the open hatch it thundered, wild and insistent. Below, the Rhine glinted like a blade slipped halfway from its scabbard. Arnhem's rooftops were half blurred by a pale morning mist, church spires poking through like bayonets. The briefing had called it a perfect September day for a jump. Perfect was a curious word to use when men were about to tumble from the sky into an argument with the Third Reich. The red jump light flared in the gloom of the fuselage. A moment later, it snapped green. My sergeant shouted, but the words blew backward, lost under engine noise. Still, we knew the drill. Fists clamped on static lines, eyes forward, trust the routine. One by one, the lads vanished into blue, each swallowed by the rush of wind. When my turn came, I stepped clear without thinking, as if the floor simply gave way. The world flipped, inside out, upside down, and then the belly of the Dakota slid overhead, silver against the sun, already banking away. For a breath, there was silence, the astonishing hush every jumper knows, as if the air itself holds its breath out of courtesy. Then the canopy cracked open above me with a hard slap, harness biting shoulders. I was suddenly hanging, suspended like a marionette, jerking gently as the silk filled and steadied. All around, white and khaki domes blossomed, hundreds of airborne petals drifting on invisible currents. I heard myself laugh, a surprised, boyish sound lost in the wind. The beauty of it was obscene, really, soaring over fields stitched with hedgerows and canals, barns no larger than matchboxes, cows trotting startled below. The war felt miles away, tucked behind the horizon with the noise of London pubs on a Saturday night. I checked my canopy lines, no twists, patted the sten clipped to my chest. My boots swam over the quilt of farmland, and for a heartbeat, I believed this impossible plan might actually be clever. Then the mist thinned, and Arnhem's outskirts sharpened, red-tiled roofs and narrow streets riddling the landscape. Smoke coiled from a pair of chimneys. Sunday cooking or something less homely. I saw the bridge in the distance, a steel arc spanning the river, sunlight glinting off girders. It was smaller than the photographs suggested, fragile in the vastness of sky. Somewhere down there, German gunners were adjusting their spectacles, lifting field glasses, muttering about unexpected guests. I pictured them fiddling with safety catches, hands shaking slightly the way mine did when I first handled a Bren. We'd been promised light opposition, but promises from intelligence officers were like pub debts after closing time. Easily made, rarely kept. A deep boom rolled up from the earth, distant but unmistakable. The artillery had begun to speak. A lazy conversation at first, single thumps that made the ground quiver. I saw spurts of dark soil leap from a meadow as shells bracketed our landing zone. Parachutes ahead jerked and fluttered in the concussions. Somewhere to my left, a transport plane trailed black smoke, engine coughing, the aircraft wobbling like a drunk refusing to sit. It vanished into the haze before I learned its fate. The canopy above me bucked as a gust tugged the silk. Below, scattered trees reached with skeletal branches, wanting any fool who descended too low. I tugged the risers to steer clear, eyes flicking to fellow jumpers. One lad drifted past, face pale, helmet chin strap flapping uselessly. He mouthed something. Might have been a prayer. Might have been my name. Too late to ask. The wind carried him beyond earshot, a leaf in a storm. I dropped through a patch of low cloud. Inside was nothing but wet gleam, the world erased. My breathing sounded loud against the cloth of my helmet, each inhale tasting of cold cotton and cordite ghosts. For a few seconds, I was alone in a vapor cocoon, drifting, blind, weightless. I thought about home, Mum in the garden pruning roses, Dad's old gramophone scratching out Glenn Miller. They'd promised a letter would be waiting in my kit bag when I got back. Silly thought, really, measuring the future in letters when the next minute was still up for debate. The mist shredded away, and suddenly the earth surged up, alarmingly close. I glanced at the altimeter strapped to my wrist. Barely 600 feet, and falling fast. The designated field sprawled ahead, bordered by a thin dirt road and, damn their luck, a smattering of German trucks parked nose to tail. Men in gray uniforms spilled out, pointing skyward, rifles jerking upward like angry punctuation. Muzzle flashes winked. The first cracks of small arms fire slapped the air. Sharp reports cutting through the distant rumble of artillery. Bullets hissed past, wicked bees searching for one sweet drop of blood. Training kicked my heartbeat into a sprint. I curled knees together, tightened elbows. No matter the chaos, land properly or risk a snapped leg before the fight even starts. A parachute shredded below me, silk torn by tracers, the jumper flailing. He fell faster, arms windmilling, canopy a tattered ghost. I swallowed hard, stomach folding in on itself. Couldn't help him. Could barely help myself. Rounds smacked the canopy cloth, dull punches above my head. One burned through, a neat hole the size of a coin. But the silk held. I yanked left, trying to drift beyond the trucks into a corner of the field shaded by poplars. The wind had opinions of its own, shoving me sideways, nearer to a hedgerow teeming with Germans. I glimpsed their helmets, bobbing, field gray blending with dusty green. A machine gun hammered. The sound, raw, metallic, chattering in manic bursts. Tracer lines zipped upward, bright orange dashes slicing through paratroopers like someone underlining a sentence in fury. Below me, another canopy crumpled as its occupant hit the ground too hard, a blossom folding fast. He bounced, rifle skittering away, then rolled behind a stone wall. At least he moved. Good lad. I muttered a curse, half prayer, half promise, and pulled hard on a backriser to swing clear of a telephone pole looming like a spear. Wires hissed inches from my packs. Static fizzed in my ears as if the cable itself were complaining about the invasion. Time stretched thin, every second magnified. The field's grass rippled in the morning breeze, blades catching sunlight. Somewhere beyond, cows bawled in confusion, and the air smelled bizarrely of manure and cordite, life and death braided together. My shadow raced me downward, an eager silhouette arriving a heartbeat ahead. Training voices echoed in my skull. Bend your knees, keep your chin in, roll with the momentum. Easier said from a classroom floor in Wiltshire than under angry Dutch sky. Wooden crates lay scattered at the far edge of the field, supply canisters kicked loose from planes, one smashed against a tree trunk, splintering, tins of biscuits spinning like coins. I remembered the sergeant joking we'd get tea at the bridge by supper. Perhaps the biscuits were a start. Optimism felt thin as the silk above me now. Gunfire thickened, overlapping crack on crack until it became a jagged roar. Somewhere close, a mortar thumped, followed by a wet crump of impact. Soil rained upward, black confetti. A shock wave slapped my boots, swinging me like a pendulum. The canopy sagged briefly, stealing breath from my lungs, then inflated again with a snap that jarred my teeth. I was maybe 50 feet now, close enough to see individual German faces. Pale, eyes wide, mouths open as they shouted at one another. One knelt, aiming a rifle directly at me. He couldn't miss if he tried. My hand itched for the sten, but the harness pinned my arms wide like a crucifixion. All I could do was meet his gaze. For a split second I saw a boy younger than me, freckles beneath the helmet rim. His rifle kicked. Pain did not come. The shot went high, bless his nerves or my luck. I soared over him, boots skimming treetops, and at last the wind conceded. The ground slammed up in a rush. I bent knees, hit hard, jolt up spine, teeth clack, then rolled, webbing thumping earth. My helmet bounced off the turf. Stars burst behind my eyes. Grass filled my mouth, damp and metallic with mud. The canopy collapsed in a hiss, silk swishing across soil like a seashell dragged by tide. I spat, scrambled, fingers clawing harness buckles. A bullet whined overhead, snapping a branch. Leaves fluttered down, lazy and indifferent. Harness off, sten in hands. I crouched behind a low ditch, chest heaving. The sky still rained parachutes, some drifting majestic, others spiraling wounded. Smoke smeared the horizon. Distant artillery boomed. Closer machine guns rattled. Voices everywhere. Shouts in English, barks in German, screams without language. A flare arced above the field, lurid green, fizzing as it fell. My sergeant tumbled into the ditch beside me, face streaked with dirt, eyes bright with something between fear and excitement. "Welcome to Arnhem," he said, breath ragged. Another shell landed beyond the hedgerow, earth geysering. He checked his watch, inhaled slow, and slapped my shoulder. "Bridge is that way." "Long walk, lad." He grinned like a man at a Sunday footy match. I found myself grinning back, a mad shared joke amid the madness. We stood, crouched low, dashed toward a break in the fence. Boots crunched broken glass, some farmhouse window sacrificed. The air smelled of cordite and cow dung, cold drizzle beginning to patter on helmet rims. A sniper's crack split the morning. Someone screamed, cut short. I tasted bile. The promise of a fight, the promise of glory, the promise of anything. Suddenly felt hollow against the wet wind in my face. Ahead, beyond a shallow rise, more Germans were forming up, rifles lifted. The field that had seemed so welcoming from the air was a killing ground now, littered with collapsed canopies and men crawling for cover. I tightened my grip on the sten, finger finding the trigger guard smooth with use. The sergeant muttered, "On me," and we lunged forward. That was when a burst of machine gun fire stitched the soil inches from my boots, dirt spitting up in a vicious zipper. We dove behind a hay cart, hay bales exploding into yellow dust. My heart hammered like a fist on a locked door. The sergeant shoved magazines into my pouch with shaking hands. His voice trembled, barely a whisper. "They're ready for us." I peered around the splintered wood, saw the bridge's steel ribs glinting in the sun far off, impossibly distant. Between us and that shimmer lay streets, snipers, and whatever surprises higher command had missed. The rattle of gunfire sharpened. Enemy shouts rose, overlapping. I swallowed. Tasted grit. The morning mist that had softened the jump now hugged the rooftops like smoke, swallowing shapes, hiding threats. Somewhere, deeper in town, a church bell tolled, irregular and plaintive, as though confused by the sudden influx of souls. We had minutes to move, or be pinned forever in this field. I locked eyes with the sergeant, nodded once, and braced to sprint. The sten felt light now, almost friendly. My boots dug into mud, muscles coiled. A sudden swarm of tracer rounds arced overhead, red slashes marking our line of advance. I felt heat on my cheek where one passed too close. The air smelled burnt, electric. Voices shouted warnings, but my ears rang. We launched ourselves from the cart, feet pounding through churned earth, shattered glass crunching again, and I saw Germans raising weapons, shouting. Sound stretched thin, like a record playing too slow. I sucked in cold air, lungs burning. The bridge shimmered, the river glinting, a narrow promise of completion. But right now, in this moment, there was only the next ditch, the next doorway, the next breath. Gunfire erupted, louder, closer. I ducked, veering toward a cluster of trees that offered the thinnest illusion of cover. The sergeant yelled something. Could have been my name, could have been an order, but it was swept away by the roar of a machine gun spitting from a farmhouse window. And as I hurled myself toward the trees, the earth before me erupted in a fountain of dirt and splinters, a mortar round finding its mark. Heat slapped my face, ears went numb. The world tilted, vision shimmering, as if viewed through water. I tasted blood, coppery on my tongue, but felt no wound. Smoke drifted past, thin and gray. Somewhere behind the haze, Germans barked commands, and British voices answered with day curses and defiance. The river wind carried the distant slap of water against pilings, a whisper of the crossing yet to come. I wiped grit from my eyes, steadied the sten, and scanned for the sergeant. A shadow darted to my left. Could have been him, could have been a stranger. No time to confirm. Bullets clipped leaves overhead, sending them spinning like confetti at a funeral. The field was no longer a field, but a crucible, forging whatever courage we could scrape together. I inhaled, felt lungs protest. The bridge still glinted, but it seemed farther than ever. I crouched, gathered what resolve I had left, and prepared to move again, because staying still felt like dying in slow motion. The air thrummed with hostile energy. The morning sun felt suddenly cold. Then I heard the unmistakable clatter of bicycles. German patrol riding hard along the lane to cut us off. Their spokes flickered in sunlight, helmets bobbing. A fresh wave of bullets sprayed the hedge. I gritted my teeth, raised the stand, and squeezed the trigger. The weapon bucked, brass casings tumbling, and in that furious rattle the sky, the mist, the bridge, all narrowed to the single act of survival. And with each shot I felt myself steering, ever so slightly, toward the contested landing zone ahead, toward a future written in gun smoke and broken glass, toward the bridge that waited like an unblinking eye. We hustled through the trees in fits and starts, the sergeant and I trading the lead, each dash a gamble paid for in breath and luck. The field behind crackled with gunfire, but ahead the ground dipped toward a narrow lane lined by hedgerows and half-collapsed chicken coops. Smoke curled from one roof, still smoldering, dripping embers like slow rain. A stray chicken clucked madly in the road, wings flapping as though it meant to take flight and join the parachutes still wilting from the sky. I felt the absurd urge to laugh, but the rhythm of my boots and the rasp of damp webbing on my collar held the humor down. We crossed the lane in a low sprint. Broken glass crunching under soles, must have been bottles once, Dutch gin by the smell. A burst of rifle fire chased us. Splinters jumped from a gatepost inches from my elbow. "Keep moving," the sergeant hissed, voice hoarse, the sound flattened by adrenaline. We vaulted a ditch, slick with mud, and scrambled up the far bank. The hedgerow offered a blind sanctuary, leaves dripping from the morning drizzle. Beyond it, Arnhem's outskirts unfurled, brick houses in neat rows, gardens trampled by retreating civilians, shutters hanging crooked like broken teeth. The distant bridge thrust its steel ribs above the rooftops, unmistakable against a sky now sliding from bright September blue to the pewter promise of rain. Only a mile, maybe less. Yet distance in combat has its own elastic rules. We weren't alone for long. Two more paras emerged from the smoke, one limping, boot crimson at the toe. He clenched his rifle like a walking stick. The other carried a wireless set the size of a small suitcase, aerial whipping about. Static hissed from the speaker, a restless ghost searching for a voice. "Lost B Company," the operator muttered, fiddling knobs. "Just crackle and dead air." Rumor spread on silence quicker than words. Germans flooding in from the north, tanks sighted on the road to Ada. Nobody knew for sure, but doubt tasted metallic on every tongue. We pressed on through back gardens, vaulting fences, boots thudding on soft earth where tulips once stood. I stole a look inside one kitchen, table laid for breakfast. Jam jar still open, bread knife abandoned mid-slice. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, unaware it now kept German time. At the corner of Apeldoornseweg, we met the first organized knot of our lads. Platoon from 2 Para, hunkered behind an overturned tram. Their officer, young and sharp-jawed, waved us over. "Major Frost's pushing to the bridge," he said, without greeting. "We're the knife tip, need every blade." He pointed down the tram-lined avenue where smoke drifted low. The tram's shattered windows glimmered like ice, and spent casings glittered among the cobblestones. We folded into their column, 20-odd men, faces smeared with soot and disbelief. The sergeant tapped my shoulder. "Stay close, short bursts, watch the rooftops." Simple instructions, old as musketry, but fresh reassurance in a city grown unfamiliar by the minute. The advance began in pulses, 3 men rush, 3 men cover, rifle cracks punctuating the slow march. Snipers teased us from unseen perches, bullets licking brickwork, but discipline kept panic leashed. We ducked through a butcher's shop, flies already circling meat left on hooks, then back onto the street past a bombed-out sedan still ticking hot. The air reeked of petrol, cordite, and the sour undertone of burst sewers. At every doorway, more fragments of units joined, glider pilots lugging carbines, engineers with satchel charges, medics loaded with crumpled bandages already brown. We passed a corporal kneeling beside a man propped against a lamppost, trying to stanch a thigh wound while whispering something soft, maybe a hymn, maybe a curse. The wounded paratroopers stared skyward, lips moving as though counting parachutes only he could see. Above, the sun dimmed behind rolling cloud, diffused light glazing everything the sullen gray of old pewter. Distant artillery thumped, German guns probing the landing zones perhaps, or British heavies replying from miles off. Each concussion vibrated windows, dust fluting from roofs like hourglass sand. "Frost's men are on the bridge already," the young officer said as we crouched behind a bakery wall, panting. "We get there, we lock it down." He checked his watch, hands steady, voice pretending calm. "German reaction shouldn't be organized yet." The sentence trailed away as a half-track rumbled somewhere ahead, engine growling like a caged bear. Organized enough, I thought. We cut through alleyways, weapons tight to chests. Rain began, a fine drizzle that ticked on helmets and slicked cobbles. It muted the world, swallowed distant cries, turned smoke to gauze. We slipped past a churchyard where tombstones leaned like eavesdropping old men, and the bell tower loomed empty, rope dangling through shattered shutters. The sergeant's boots squelched on fallen leaves. "Keep low," he murmured, as if speaking louder might wake the dead. Near the river, resistance stiffened. German squads blocked intersections with sandbag nests and lorries slewed crosswise. We flanked one post through a haberdasher's shop, spools of ribbon strewn like confetti, and kicked out the back door onto a veranda overlooking the quay. From there, the bridge rose full and daunting, its arch a ribcage of steel over pewter water. British paras clustered at the near abutment, their maroon berets bright even through grime. Brin guns barking from sandbag walls hastily piled from civilian coal sacks. A white-painted sign, Arnhem, hung lopsided, bullet-chewed. A final sprint across open ground lay between us and that sanctuary. Mortar shells popped somewhere upriver, and shrapnel hissed across rooftops. "Go!" the officer waved. We broke cover, feet hammering puddles. Bullets snapped overhead, sparking off tram rails. My lungs burned ice. In the chaos, I saw fragments. A corporal hauling a wounded mate by the collar, a pigeon exploding in a puff of feathers as a bullet found it mid-flight, glass raining from an upper window as a Brin tracer stitched the sill. We tumbled behind the sandbags, gasping, greeted by a captain with eyes red from smoke. "Welcome to the party," he said. "Lines are thin south side. Dig in." He handed the radio operator coordinates scrawled on torn map edges. "Tell brigade we're on the bridge and intend to stay, if they can hear us at all." The operator nodded, spun dials. Static answered, broken by faint Morse, impossible to parse through the interference. I peered over the sandbags. The bridge deck stretched long and exposed, a gentle upward curve to the far shore, where German trucks already disgorged infantry. Our sappers had blown only side rails, not the span. We meant to keep it intact for 30 Corps rolling up from the south. Until they arrived, we were the cork in the bottle. The sergeant nudged me toward a doorway fronting the bridge road, a burnt-out cafe with half its facade sheared away. "That'll be our post. Windows on the span, cellar for ammo." Inside, the smell of charred timber mingled with stale coffee. Chairs lay in splinters, a jukebox lay on its face, glass shattered. We dragged sandbags to fortify the window, stacking them in a rough parapet, while others fetched boxes of .303 and 9mm, liberated from smashed canisters. Whispered orders floated through the ruins. Range estimates, sector arcs, watch for armor. Outside, rain thickened, pattered through roof holes, hissed on glowing cigarette tips. I slid a fresh magazine into the sten, checked the chamber twice, fingers trembling at last now the running had paused. Across the street, a medic taped a red cross to a doorway, the symbol already stained dark. Muffled cries drifted from inside, each one tightening the muscles along my spine. "Look sharp!" The sergeant pointed through a jagged gap. A German officer strode the far carriageway, field glasses to eyes, oblivious or bold. A single rifle crack from our end sent him sprawling, glasses spinning into the gutter. Enemy troops scattered behind lorries, helmets bobbing. Our Bren chattered, brass cascading down the sandbags like golden rain. The fight for the bridge had commenced in earnest. Through the drizzle, silhouettes moved, some ours, sprinting to reinforce, some theirs edging forward between parked cars. Snipers on both banks probed any careless movement. A bullet punched through the cafe sign above my head, wood chips stinging my neck. I ducked, heart hammering. The sergeant grinned, teeth bright in the gloom. First greeting card. Dusk edged early under black clouds, street lights dark since occupation. Fires provided a hellish glow instead, fuel dump burning by the rail yard, warehouse roof aflame further down river. Their reflections rippled in water below the bridge, red fingers licking the current. Somewhere upriver, faint engine thumps hinted at boats, ours, theirs, no way to know yet. Inside the cafe, the radio operator crouched beside the bar, headset clamped. "Intermittent contact with division," he said to no one in particular, frustration bleeding into every syllable. "They're asking for status. I told them we're holding. Couldn't mention we're 2 platoons light and counting." I settled behind the sandbagged window, barrel resting on a folded coat for steadiness. Rain beaded on the metal, slid down to drip off the magwell. My breath clouded in the cold air. Summer had died suddenly. Autumn storm marching in. The street ahead lay eerily empty for a heartbeat. Smoke swirling across cobbles like stage fog. Then a whistle, German officer again, and a squad dashed for a postal van, rifles up. I squeezed the trigger in short bursts, felt the sten shiver, brass clinking on broken tiles. One figure crumpled, others yanked him to cover. Adrenaline steadied my hands now, thoughts narrowing to sight picture and trigger feel. The bridge felt less like an objective, more like the center of the earth. Every line of fire, every hope converging on its steel bones. In the distance, beyond ruined rooftops, thunder rolled. Artillery or weather, hard to tell. The drizzle thickened to steady rain, drumming on helmets, whispering through shattered glass. Night crept closer, bringing with it the promise of relief from 30th Corps. Tanks, guns, thousands of boots to cross this span and sweep us all the way to Germany. That was the plan. Plans, like parachutes, looked lovely overhead. It was down here on the ground they showed their holes. A runner darted in, breathless. Germans massing on Eusebius Tower, snipers picking us off. Frost wants counterfire. He was gone again, splashing back into the street before anyone answered. The sergeant sighed, hefted a captured Mauser with scope. Church Tower, then. Cover me. I kept my Sten trained on the roadway while he slipped upstairs to a half-collapsed balcony. Seconds later, the Mauser barked, sharp against the storm's murmur. 3 shots, deliberate. Somewhere across the river, a figure toppled from the belfry, tiny against the grand tower stone, falling all the slower for the rain's curtain. My stomach growled unexpectedly. Reminder I'd eaten only a toffee bar since dawn. Food felt decadent now. The cafe's pantry yielded tins of Dutch biscuits slightly singed. We shared them in silence, crumbs mixing with dust on our tongues. Outside, the Bren sputtered, then paused. The gunner frantically swapping barrels, glowing dull red. The radio hissed, a broken whisper slicing through static. Hold the north end. Armor delayed. Repeat, delayed. The operator slapped the case. Bastards are an hour late already, he muttered. Nobody answered. We all heard the unsaid. An hour in combat measured in lives, not minutes. Full dark settled. Lanterns were banned. One glow could invite a shell. Instead, we worked by the orange pulse of distant fires, silhouettes jerking like haunted puppets. Water slapped softly against bridge pilings, steady beneath the chaos. A lullaby gone unheard. Midway through reloading, a single shot rang, the uncanny flat crack of a sniper's rifle, and the Bren gunner stiffened, slumped forward over the sandbags. His helmet rolled off, tapping stone with a gentle clink incongruous as wind chimes. Blood trickled, black under night sky. For an instant, nobody moved. The moment stretched taut as a wire. Then shouts erupted. Men dragging the body back, curses spilling, boots skidding on wet tile. The sniper had found his range. Our window suddenly felt a spotlight. I pressed against the wall, pulse hammering behind my eyes, listening to the rain, the distant artillery, the steady hiss of the frustrated radio. Somewhere out there, unseen, a German marksman drew bead on the next silhouette. "Stay low," the sergeant breathed, crouched beside me now, Mauser across his knees. "They'll feel for us till dawn." He exhaled, foggy breath vanishing. Outside, the bridge loomed, black ribs against deeper night, every girder a promise of salvation or a tomb. And in that hush between shots, when even the rain seemed to hold its breath, I knew the real test began now. Not the mad dash across fields or the scramble through streets, but this long, grinding wait under unseen eyes, counting bullets, counting friends, counting hours, until relief rolled up or the darkness closed in for good. A shard of glass cracked under my boot as I shifted position. The sound rang louder than a bomb in the tense quiet. I froze, heart stuttering, waiting for the sniper's reply. I waited, lungs half empty, until my pounding pulse quieted enough to hear more than my own heartbeat. Nothing. No crack of follow-up fire. No hiss of passing round. The sniper had slipped back into ghosthood. Rain pattered on the cafe's sagging roof and dripped in steady rhythm through the bullet hole above me, ticking on the broken jukebox. I swallowed, throat dry as chalk despite the damp air. A breath, another. Limbs still worked. In this siege, just being unperforated felt like promotion. Outside, the bridge groaned, a long metallic sigh as steel cooled under the night drizzle. Every now and then, a gust swept up the river and fetched a hollow moan from the girders, as though the span itself lamented what men did upon it. Muzzle flashes winked on the far bank, faint glimmers swallowed by darkness before the bang reached us. Their rounds slashed low over the deck, ricocheting off the parapet with shrieks like angry cutlery. Our lads answered in staccato bursts, Bren barrels glowing dull orange before quick hands snapped them out for cool spares. The firefight felt less like thunder now, more like relentless overlapping scratches. Rats gnawing at a door that must someday give. I slid a spare magazine into a pocket I'd already torn at the seam and crawled to the doorway where the sergeant knelt, peering through a crack between sandbags. Rain streaked mud across his face, turning camouflage grease into thin rivers. He flicked his eyes to me, nodded once, an entire conversation. Still here, still breathing, still angry. He jerked his chin toward a gutted lorry abandoned in the center of the roadway. 2 Germans had crawled underneath, using the chassis as firing step. Their rifle barrels poked from shadow, spitting careful shots every minute. They were disciplined. They waited for movement instead of spraying hope into fog. Tricky bastards. "Need to snuff that," he whispered. "They're pinning the stretcher. Team!" He pointed to the verge, where 2 medics in white-banded helmets crouched over a man twitching in a widening puddle. Any dash to drag him back crossed the lorry's field of fire. I flattened behind the torn doorway, rain seeping through wool. "I'll crawl the tram rail, get angle from behind," I mouthed. He waited, then tapped my shoulder twice. Go. Simple as breathing. The air smelled of wet brick and cordite tang. I slithered onto the slick cobbles, ribs bumping the raised tram rail that ran like a spine toward the river. Each push slid my smock through puddles cold enough to sting. The world narrowed to iron taste on my tongue and the scrape of webbing on stone. Ahead, a street lamp pole lay smashed across the tracks. Its shattered glass sparkled even in the meager fire glow, a star field underfoot. I slipped past, glass crunching under elbow, loud as church bells in my ears. No shot followed. Either the sniper missed it or reckoned me a corpse already. 30 yards felt like 3 miles, but at last I reached a spot where a collapsed shop front formed a dark alcove opposite the lorry's tail. The angle was low, belly level to the road. Perfect. Rain drummed on the Sten barrel as I eased it forward. In the dim glow, I could just see boot soles poking from beneath the chassis. I breathed out long, letting muscles settle, sightpost hovering on black leather. One squeeze, nothing. Safety catch. Bloody amateur hour. I nudged it off with gloved thumb, exhaled again. 2-round tap, the way Sergeant drilled us. Thud, thud. Boots jerked, a sharp shout. I shifted sight left, caught movement, tapped again. The reply was a clatter of rifles skidding on cobbles, followed by silence thick enough to chew. The medics dashed, boots slapping water, stretcher handles rattling. They snatched the wounded lad with practiced grace, disappearing into a doorway. I rolled onto my back, breath fogging into the rain, letting each nerve unclench by increments. Somewhere, upriver artillery boomed, a deeper note, British 25-pounders maybe, funneled down the Rhine valley. Sound rolled across roofs, rattling loose tiles, felt like home answering. I crawled back, mud now a second skin. The sergeant hauled me over the sandbags and grinned, though the expression faltered when he clocked the fresh tear in my sleeve. He thumbed the fabric, just cloth. He slapped my shoulder twice in approval, then turned to the radio set propped on a beer crate. Static still hissed, punctuated by occasional pops, lightning in the ether. The operator cranked the handle, headset crooked on one ear. "Divisional net dead. Only snippets on brigade channel. Sounds like Krauts are jamming." He rocked back, rubbing his eyes red from strain. The moment he lifted his head, the sniper cracked again, wood splintered above, a shard biting the operator's cheek. He cursed softly, dabbed at blood. The sergeant barked for him to keep low. He did, shoulders hunched as if hiding from rain inside his own bones. Hours crawled. Night thickened to syrup. Rain eased to mist, then stopped. Roof gutters dripped a slow metronome. Smoke hung stubborn over ruined houses, mixing with river fog until the far bank vanished altogether. Only the occasional flare popped high, spilling ghastly white light that etched every shell hole in cruel clarity before fading to black. Under each flare, we froze, statues with beating hearts, praying the sniper blinked first. We rotated positions. 30 minutes on the window, 30 back in the cafe's rear, where a brazier of broken chair legs hissed quietly. The little heat smelled of pitch pine and damp socks. Somebody found a tin of condensed milk. We passed it round like communion, thick sweetness coating tongues numbed by fear. Conversation drifted to football, to girls, to nonsense, anything not wearing a Feldgrau tunic. Laughter surfaced in ragged bubbles. Even the sniper could not kill every joke. Sometime past midnight, my watch cracked but still ticking. We heard motors, low, throaty, east end of the bridge. We lined the sandbags, weapons ready. Through the veil of fog loomed an armored car, headlights blacked but engine cough echoing. Behind it growled a rumble deeper than anything yet, Panther, maybe, or one of their clever self-propelled guns. Our Piat team scrambled, cursing as they wrestled the spring that always stuck in cold. We waited. The vehicles halted just beyond flare range. Engines idled, then died. Silence returned, heavier than before. Psychological warfare, someone muttered. Let us stew. The sniper resumed, methodical as rain. His bullet struck a stack of ammo boxes, punched through two before lodging in a bandolier of .303. No detonation. Dud? Miracle. Either way, breath held until we were sure the boxes wouldn't cook off and turn the cafe into a funeral pyre. Sometime near dawn, a thin light seeped through clouds, enough to chalk outlines where darkness had been solid. We were haggard shadows ourselves, beards sprung overnight, eyes sunk. The sergeant tallied ammunition. Bren team down to 300 rounds, Sten mags half spent, grenades scarce. He didn't announce figures, his frown said enough. Relief had to come today or math would bankrupt us. A runner from Frost's headquarters skidded in, uniform plastered with soot. Jerry's probing south side, multi-direction. Major requests snipers suppressed along the quay and... He hesitated, voice cracking on exhaustion. And armored column from 30th Corps still delayed. Roadblocks and blown bridges south of Nijmegen. Earliest arrival, 18 hours. The cafe fell silent, except for the restless radio static. 18 hours was 3 battalions worth of ammo, and we weren't 3 battalions. The sergeant pressed his palms together, laced fingers against his mouth, as though in prayer he'd abandoned years ago. He nodded to the runner. "Tell Major we'll hold." The words came out calm, but the muscles in his jaw bulged. The sky lightened to sullen gray. Rain threatened again, fine drops trembling in the air. We set about reinforcing. Doors ripped off hinges to shore the sandbags. Floorboards pried for firing steps. Every thump echoed across empty rooms like drums summoning ghosts. In the back cellar, we found wine racks still stocked. We smashed them, bottles drained, not drunk, but poured into crates for Molotovs. The sergeant joked about sacrilege against French claret. Nobody laughed long. At first light, the sniper finally revealed himself, or we forced him to. A mortar crew up the street bracketed the church tower where he'd likely holed up. 3 rounds walked in. The third struck just below the spire, stone and slate cascading. A figure in gray tumbled, tiny against the dawn, arms flailing. He vanished into the smoke. The cheer that rose was brief, almost guilty. 1 ghost down, city still crawling. The lull that followed felt unnatural. Gunfire thinned to sporadic cracks. Somewhere, a distant vehicle backfired, or maybe a mortar misfired. It echoed strangely through ruined streets. A breeze off the water carried gun smoke away, leaving a damp sweetness of riverweed and shattered plaster. Birds dared chirp again, tentative notes. It felt like the pause between inhaled breath and spoken sentence. We all knew the next word would be loud. We sent out 2 patrols to scavenge ammo from fallen containers. They returned with tins of biscuits, a case of 9mm, and 1 wounded corporal who'd taken shrapnel across his back. Supplies traded hands like treasure. I stowed an extra Bren magazine in my jacket. Its weight comforted like a flask in winter. Mid-morning, German artillery woke in earnest. Not heavy siege guns, just light howitzers, but close enough that flight time was measured in heartbeats. We learned the rhythm fast. Faint pop across the river, 3-second pause, then the crash somewhere in our quarter. Roof tiles erupted, windows shattered anew, walls that had held through blitz and occupation finally sighed sideways. Dust rolled through streets, soft and sinister. Each detonation sent fish plates clanging on cafe tables amid showers of plaster. Ears rang until we tasted iron on our tongues. Between barrages, infantry pushed, rifles crackling, grenades chucked blind into doorways. They tested our line like wolves mouthing a fence. We threw them back, but ground was a currency we spent reluctantly. A red beret lieutenant bled out on the cafe floor singing "A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square" until the last note dwindled into wet gurgle. The song stuck in my head, looping, absurd soundtrack to fallen brickwork. The cellar became triage, lamp dim, air thick with iodine and prayers. Bodies stacked near the stairs for lack of stretchers. A padre murmured over each, anointing with whatever wine hadn't gone to bombs. His voice cracked only once, when a lad no older than 17 clutched his sleeve and asked if Mum might understand he'd tried. The padre promised she would. I believed him because anything else would have broken me right there. By afternoon, the Germans wheeled those armored cars forward again, firing coax machine guns at windows. Our Piat finally behaved. One bomb arched, struck the lead car square, blooming orange flame that punched cheers out of every throat. The survivors ducked, scrambled back, but even small victories cost sweat. The launcher's spring snapped, rendering it a useless tube. Smoke thickened into a permanent fog. Soot-rimmed nostrils turned phlegm black. The river breeze died, trapping everything under a soot sky. We fired less, counting rounds, and listened more. The clink of German mess tins somewhere in rubble, the mutter of commanders plotting. They were preparing something larger. You could feel it in the hush. I leaned my head against blasted brick, eyelids gritty. Rain resumed, light enough to feel, but not enough to wash. It mixed with sweat, with dust, ran in rivulets down my neck, cold fingers tracing my spine. In that moment, fatigue hit, a wave heavy as sandbags, threatening to drag thought under. I forced eyes open, fixed on the bridge arch, let it swoop, anchor me. Hold this. Hold one more hour, 1 hour after that. The radio crackled. At first, just static, then a voice, warped by interference.
Market, this is Garden. Hold. Armor advancing. Contact north of Nijmegen. Expect delay.
Words shredded by static, delay again. I felt my jaw clench so hard, ears popped. Evening crept, gray sliding toward black with no ceremony. German mortars shifted closer. We braced for night's renewed sniping, for infiltration through cellars we'd missed, for everything daylight had merely promised. The sergeant gathered us behind the cafe bar, half a dozen scarecrows reeking of smoke, wine, and fear. "Relief's still coming," he said, eyes sweeping each face like counting rosary beads. "Until they step onto this bridge, we make the Germans pay for every paving stone. No gaps, no surrender. Clear?" Nods all round, even from lads whose lips trembled. We dispersed to positions, pulling cap comforters over ears against gathering chill. Water slapped the pier beneath, steady, indifferent rhythm amid chaos. Somewhere a house collapsed in slow groan. beams giving, dust sighing skyward. No gunfire accompanied, the building simply lost its will to stand. I settled again behind the window parapet, stand across knees, Bren team on my left already nursing the new barrel. Down the street a lamppost burned like a torch, wick fed by leaking gas main, flames licking rain. Shadows beyond flickered, maybe Germans, maybe mirage born of exhaustion. My finger found the trigger guard, rested there. Raindrops tapped a metal roof overhead, soft percussion. Inside my helmet a hum began, first faint, then louder, the sleep-starved brain creating static of its own. I shook my head, blinked hard. Across the debris-strewn deck the Germans had strung wire obstacles, crude X-shapes, silhouetted by fire glow. Behind them I could see figures massing again, those patient wolves. A whistle cut the night, sharp and clear, followed by the chatter of an MG-34 opening like ripping cloth. I ducked as bullets lit sparks off sandbags. Our Bren answered, tracer carving red arcs. The sergeant shouted something lost in the din. Another mortar thunked near, explosion sending shattered brass lamp parts, whirling across the road like golden beetles. Voices screamed from somewhere invisible. A flare shot up, harsh white light bleached color from the world as it drifted down, casting our broken cafe in surgical glare. In that stark moment, I saw just how thin our line truly was. Dozen men spaced across shattered doorways, uniforms soaked, eyes sunken, each clutching dwindling magazines. And beyond the flare's fall, Germans kept coming, gray shadows coalescing into mass, bayonets glinting wetly. The flare guttered, plunged us back into near dark. My heart rattled ribs like a caged bird. I tightened grip on the sten, felt the chill of rain-soaked steel. Somewhere far downriver, I imagined tank engines, the promise of Cromwells and Shermans, but the night gave only the echo of artillery and the quiet hiss of rain on rubble. We braced, poised to hold another minute, another heartbeat, under the sniper's watchful emptiness, and the storm of bullets building anew, waiting for friend or fate to reach us first. Dawn bled in thin and colorless, little more than darkness diluted. The storm clouds had lumbered east, but their parting gift was a sky the tone of lead shot. We crouched behind our parapet, stubble bristling with cold dew, staring down a bridge that seemed to grow longer the more we held it. Every rib of steel, every rivet, glimmered with condensation that caught the first gray light like sweat on a boxer's brow. Somewhere beyond that silent span, tanks were supposedly grinding north at road march speed. Yet the only engine we heard belonged to the enemy, idling, impatient, just out of Piat range. The sergeant broke a biscuit in half, handed me the larger piece. I crunched it slowly, let the crumbs stick to cracked lips. Breakfast. He glanced at his watch, its face spider-webbed by some flying brick, and muttered, "Corps was meant to cross by now." He didn't sound angry, only tired, the way a man grows weary of a leaking roof. Drip by relentless drip. A clatter of loose glass somewhere inside the cafe reminded us the building still shifted under last night's shelling. Dust trickled from a ceiling beam. We ignored it. There were no safer walls left to choose. The radio operator was our metronome of hope, perched by his set, tapping, tuning, swearing softly through bitten tongue. Static washed the room in an endless surf. Now and then a phrase leapt clear, call signs unfamiliar, Dutch resistance chatter, clipped German, then sank again. He scribbled time of intercepts on a tea-stained postcard because proper forms were long gone. Each entry felt like marking the passing of hours we could ill afford. A lull spread over the bridge front, eerie as a church between hymns. Smoke still drifted from the warehouse fires, yet gunfire had slackened to random rifle pops, testing shots, not assaults. In that breathing space, stretcher-bearers ventured onto the span, white crosses gleaming chalky against grime. They moved like figures in slow cinema, bending, lifting, returning with shapes that no longer resembled the men who'd carried rifles beside them yesterday. One bearer vomited into the gutter and wiped his mouth on a sleeve slick with someone else's blood. We rotated watches. Off shift, I pushed into the rear room seeking anything useful. My boots crunched a dusting of ground glass that used to be beer tumblers. The floorboard edges were warped by water from the broken roof. They creaked like unhappy memory. In a pantry, I found a single jar of pickled onions, dusty but unbroken. Slipped it into my pouch. Small victories mattered. A medic beckoned me to shoulder a wounded lad. Stanley, a Yorkshire sapper I'd shared cigarettes with on the drop zone. Bandage over his abdomen had turned reddish black. He drifted in and out, mumbling about sheep on Ilkley Moor. We hauled him to the cellar triage, feet bumping steps slick with congealed blood. As we laid him among the rows, the padre pressed 2 fingers to his throat, shook his head once. I stood there a beat longer than needed, staring at Stanley's boots, laces still neatly tied. Then I climbed back up, boots sticky, lungs full of iodine stench, anger furring my throat. Mid-morning, the Germans tried probing again, half-hearted, perhaps gauging our strength. A squad advanced under the burnt-out tram, helmets bobbing. Our Bren spoke in curt bursts, and they fell back, dragging 2 men by the ankles. I saw one helmet left behind, rolling, settling by a puddle that reflected a sliver of sky. After that, only sporadic shots, as though both sides had agreed to postpone further argument until someone else arrived. Rumors traveled faster than bullets. One runner swore he'd heard Shermans reached Nijmegen's outskirts. Another that the tanks were bogged south of Grave. Someone else claimed gliders with poles were already prepping to drop east of us. Truth was a luxury. We traded hearsay instead, each scrap a coin to buy another minute of morale. The sergeant listened, nodded, filed it away without comment. I knew he counted only what his eyes could confirm. Near noon, a German voice barked through a megaphone from beyond the smoke, English delivered in thick accent. "British soldiers, bridge is hopeless. Lay down weapons and walk out." The words bounced off damp brick, almost comical if not for the silence that followed. A Bren gunner answered with a single derisive burst, stitching the fog where the speaker stood. No fresh invitation came. The sergeant organized a stand-to at the rail overlooking the river. We took turns scanning the southern bend, searching for that first tank silhouette or even a friendly pennant. All we saw was water sliding beneath, slapping hypnotically at the pilings, eddies streaked with soot runoff. Boats passed occasionally, civilian scows pressed into German service, hugging far bank out of our line of sight. Their engines throbbed dull through the mist. Each throb underlined our isolation. Afternoon dragged. Artillery started again, lazy, harassing fire landing short in the warehouses behind us. Shells burst with flat cracks that vibrated window frames but caused little damage. Psychological seasoning. Between rounds, an uncanny quiet settled. Flies buzzed over discarded bandages. Somewhere a dog barked, trapped perhaps in a garden it once guarded. Time stretched until seconds felt strung on wire, ready to snap. I found myself dozing upright against the parapet, rifle across knees, dreaming of nothing, just sinking blankness. A hand jolted my shoulder, the sergeant's. "Eat." He handed over half a chocolate bar melted to wrapper. I peeled foil with numb fingers, savored the syrupy sweetness mixed with grit. "Stay awake," he added. "If relief shows and we're nodding, I'll bloody kick us off the bridge myself." He almost smiled, but the expression died before birth. Late afternoon, a courier from Frost's HQ arrived, breathless, uniform smeared with Black River mud. He delivered a scrap of message, voice hoarse. "Corps delayed again. Maybe nightfall. Hold firm. Air resupply unlikely due to weather." He waited for acknowledgement, but none came. The sergeant only stared, then turned away to rearrange sandbags that didn't need rearranging. The courier left, boots thumping over shattered glass like punctuation marks on despair. Rain returned in fitful spurts, drumming on steel, seeping through roof holes to patter on the jukebox's ruined carcass. A bullet hole in the ceiling funneled water in a steady thread that filled an enamel bowl. Nobody bothered to move it. The radio operator signaled me over. Eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. He pressed the headset to my ear. Through static, I caught faint Morse, spaced slow. "Baker 2, supply drops diverted, stand by." Then nothing. I handed the set back. He shrugged, lips thin. Could be ours, could be Kraut spoof. Either way, no drop today. Twilight blurred edges of the world. Fires rekindled in distant districts, painting clouds rust red. German loudspeakers tried again, classical music this time, scratchy gramophone strings drifting across rubble. The melody was haunting, something I recognized from Mum's radio, a lullaby perhaps. It floated over twisted tram lines, seeped into shell holes, dared us to remember there were once concerts in this town. Our Bren crew cursed and fired a burst towards the sound. But the music played on, ghostly and uncaring. We held evening roll call, more ritual than necessity. 24 able rifles left in our cafe sector. 2 Bren guns, 1 PIA T-tube now useless. Grenades down to single digits. The sergeant read the numbers without inflection, as though they described someone else's platoon. He finished, cleared his throat. "If Corps crosses tonight, we'll open a lane and join them. If not, we keep the lane closed." No one asked what came after "not." He dismissed us with a nod. Night settled, heavy and absolute, moonless behind smoke. With darkness, snipers returned, patient and vindictive. Any silhouette near a window drew fire, cracks so sharp they felt like slaps. We learned to crawl, to speak in whispers indistinguishable from wind. Lanterns stayed dark. We navigated by the ember tips of each other's cigarettes, glowing briefly, then cupped out of sight. In the lull between sniper shots, I heard water lapping louder than before. River rising on the night tide, smacking pilings with soft applause. Somewhere downstream, a boat engine coughed, then died. Oars dipping. Could have been Dutch civilians escaping. Could have been German patrols. The ambiguity nagged like a pebble in boot. Around 2-ish, we guessed, watches unreliable. An orange flash lit the southern sky. A rumble followed, distant but enormous. Our hearts leapt. Tanks, artillery paving way for corps, anti-aircraft. Minutes later, more flashes flickered, creeping northward like summer lightning. The radio spat unintelligible codes. The operator's eyes widened. Something big, but still miles off. The sergeant watched the horizon until his silhouette seemed etched into the night. Then he turned away, shoulders sagging barely perceptible. Cold crept bone deep. I hugged webbing tighter, breathed into cupped hands until moisture stung cracked skin. At some point, I realized my inner dialogue had gone silent. No curses, no prayers, just the mechanical act of existing minute by minute. The bridge's steel hummed under the chill breeze, a low vibration you felt more than heard, like a distant cello string. Hours walked past on nailed boots. The Germans did not attack in force. Perhaps they waited for daylight and heavier guns. We waited for relief that belonged to the same future as daylight, but less certain. The standoff felt like two tired fighters leaning on each other, neither with power for knockout blow, yet unwilling to break clinch. Just before first gray seeped up, a flare arced from the far bank, brighter than any previous, hanging long in the damp air. By its glare, I saw lines of German infantry forming beyond makeshift barricades, bayonets gleaming. They looked infinite in that harsh white, ants swelling from the earth. The flare drifted down, snuffed by the river, with a hiss I imagined rather than heard. Darkness folded over them again, but the image burned behind my eyelids. The sergeant crouched beside me. He spoke softly, as if reluctant to disturb the fragile fabric of what courage we had left. "They'll come at first light. Tanks or no tanks from our lot. We'll have to greet them. I nodded, throat too tight for words. He placed a hand on my helmet, brief and solid. An officer's benediction, though he wore no rank enough for it. We checked magazines by touch, arranged the last grenades, whispered arcs of fire. Somewhere behind us, a wounded man cried for water. A medic hushed him with gentle lies. The river kept slapping pilings, steady metronome of indifferent nature. Light returned grudgingly. Pearl smudge on the horizon that outlined husks of houses and the jagged teeth of ruins. And in that paling gloom, the Germans moved. First shadows, then figures, advancing with the inevitability of tide. I braced the Sten on the sandbag lip, sighted down the street where their helmets multiplied. My finger found the trigger. In my mind I still heard tank tracks from the south, faint thunder rolling nearer, any moment now. But the street ahead filled with gray shapes, rifles leveled, boots splashing through puddles that mirrored the sky. We waited for the order, for the roar of friendly engines, for any sign the plan was still alive. Only rain answered, falling anew in thin silver needles. And when the sergeant finally whispered, "Fire," I knew relief was still somewhere beyond that dull, unpromising horizon, so far off it might belong to someone else's war. I lost track of how many magazines I emptied before the sun shook itself clear of the roofs. But I knew the moment the bolt clicked on an empty chamber and my hands slapped at pouches already hollow. The Sten felt suddenly feather light, a toy stripped of purpose. I hunkered lower, heart punching ribs, and yelled for a reload. Nothing came back but the overlapping crackle of Brens and Lee Enfields, the metallic choir of a line fighting on the remainder of yesterday's faith. A private slid beside me, face smeared with brick dust, and offered 2 grease-blackened mags he'd scrounged off a casualty. "Last of mine, too," he muttered, eyes refusing to meet the bridge beyond the parapet. I rammed one home, felt the bolt bite, then pushed the spare inside my tunic like a secret. The morning assault ebbed under our stubborn fire, Germans melting into smoke wreaths on the far approach. But they'd been content to trade bodies for distance. Shell bursts peppered their dead space, stepping back only when we threatened to overreach and show our thinness. By mid-morning, the whole front sagged into a sullen stalemate held together with empty stomachs and half-truths. We gathered in the cafe's shattered dining room, checking pockets the way children check for marbles. Except our treasures were cartridges, bandages, matches. The sergeant laid our assets on a splintered table. 400 .303 rounds still linked in Bren belts, 73 loose rifle cartridges, a fistful of 9mm, 3 Mills bombs, 1 phosphorus smoke, and food amounting to 2 tins of bully beef and my jar of pickled onions. Water was worse. The porcelain wash basin we'd filled overnight now stood dry but for flecks of dust and the desiccated wings of a moth that had tried drinking too late. "Right," the sergeant said, voice scoured raw. "We ration by the clock. Water, ammo, words. No one fires except on a face you can name. No one talks unless it keeps someone breathing. Understood?" We answered with nods, throats too tight to waste spit. The radio still hissed useless meteors. The operator had unplugged his headset to save batteries, cheeks hollowed by worry. He scratched at his notebook, counting nothing. A medic rummaged through a tin of morphine syrettes. 3 left. He tucked them back like cards from a losing hand. Outside, drizzle returned. Fine, needling, more suggestion than weather. It gleamed on shattered glass underfoot, turned brick dust to pink slurry. Someone propped an enamel pot beneath the ceiling leak, chasing droplets with cupped hands whenever a fresh hole appeared. We joked the brew might taste like plaster and pigeon, but we'd sup it warm. Late morning, the sergeant organized a scrounge party. 4 of us to sweep adjacent ruins for ammo and water. 5 minutes out, no heroics. I went, using the lull as cover. We climbed through a gap punched in the cafe's rear wall, boots crunching china shards. The lane beyond stank of cordite and rotten milk, dairy wagon overturned, cargo curdling in the gutter. Files of bullet holes stitched the brickwork like black caterpillars. We ducked under sagging clotheslines, shirts flapping like surrender flags, and slipped into the remains of a grocery. Shelves toppled, canned goods burst open, syrup and flour fused into sugary cement. A beam had crushed the cash counter. Behind it we found a boxer crate of Dutch lemonade bottles miraculously intact. We smashed heads off with bayonets rather than risk the noise of a tin opener, poured the fizzy contents into canteens, burping yeasty bubbles. Sweet, but wet. In the flat above, we discovered the mother lode, a German ammo crate, still latched, perhaps staged for the assault and forgotten. Inside, 7.92 Mauser rounds and 2 drums for an MG-34. Worthless to our weapons, yet priceless for trade, we hefted the crate between us. Clinking footsteps, drawing curious sniper rounds that chipped chimney pots nearby. On the landing, a toddler's wooden horse lay on its side, one wheel spinning lazily as the building settled in the drizzle. I righted it for no sane reason, an act so gentle it made my throat ache. Downstairs, a half-door opened onto the cellar. We found 3 jerry cans of diesel, useless now, and a stack of Dutch peat bricks that would burn smokeless. We filled haversacks, spirits high until a muffled cough of a Car 98 echoed up the stairwell. A round ricocheted off a cast-iron stove, showering us with enamel shards. We bolted, peat bricks thumping against spines, lungs hoovering damp air until our ribs sang. Back at the cafe, cheers greeted the lemonade and the peat. Even the Mauser ammo won a laugh. "Handed back via barrel delivery," someone quipped. Humor, like ammo, was fired sparingly. Early afternoon brought quiet, save for distant artillery blooms. Hunger gnawed deeper than fear. We heated bully beef in a dented saucepan over a peat flame, stirring with a bayonet. The meat gelatin hissed, smell thick as wet dog, but we devoured spoonfuls paired with the briny sting of onions. As we ate, we counted bursts upriver, possibly Polish artillery, possibly our own. Hope tasted like tinned salt. Supplies inventoried. The sergeant dispatched me and the Bren team to reinforce number 3 house, an inn terrace 2 doors closer to the bridge mouth. Windows bricked with rubble offered loops to fire through. The previous crew were down to 6 men and no grenades. We hurried under cover of drizzle, glass snapping under boots despite caution. In the hallway, a grandfather clock lay on its face, hands frozen at 1:20. The moment shell fire caved the roof, we stepped over it like a sleeping sentry. I took up in the parlor where a piano crouched beneath plaster dust. Its lid, jarred by concussion, vibrated faint notes with each nearby detonation. an accidental dirge accompanying our vigil. We laid the Brin on a lace-draped sideboard, poured remaining 303 across a doily, then draped a tea towel over the receiver to keep rain from the eaves trickling into the mechanism. War is details. Across the road, Germans moved in pairs, ducking between a tobacconist and a laundry. Their helmets glimmered wetly. We engaged only when a clear shot presented, each squeeze premeditated, brass ejected into a helmet repurposed as collector. Every casing another coin we could never mint again. Mid-shift, the Sten jammed on me. Split rim lodged in the chamber. I cursed under breath, palm slick. Stripping the bolt felt surgical, every second stretching. Outside, a rifle shot punched through the window frame, snapped my sleeve but spared skin. Plaster dust filled my mouth like chalk. The Bren gunner suppressed while I clawed the blockage free. Salvageable casing tucked into pocket to file under lessons learned. Dusk approached, but the skies withheld full dark under thick cloud. We rotated watch. I slipped back to the cafe, legs numb, head light. Crossing the lane, I nearly stepped on a corpse, half buried in rubble. German, face half gone, hand still clamped around a field dressing he never applied. His tunic pockets bulged. I searched them with reluctant fingers, found a tin of sardines, 2 cigarettes in a metal case, and a photograph of a fair-haired woman with a baby perched on her knee. I kept the cigarettes, left the photo, guilt fluttering like moth wings around my heartbeat. Inside, the sergeant was divvying the last water, half a mug each, 1 swallow reserved for the wounded. He watched the level slip with a stoic's eyes, then corked the canteen as though sealing grief. "Tomorrow we'll tap the mains on the quay," he said. "Cut pipes with a bayonet if we must." Night again. Sniper fire slackened, replaced by the slow creak of enemy sappers setting mortar bases against the river wall. We could hear muffled clinks of metal on stone, faint curses carried on damp air. No ammo to waste on harassing. Instead, we listened, memorized rhythm, scrape, clink, pause. 3 men, maybe, working by feel. The radio coughed out a fragment. "Valkyrie, supply, canceled due to heavy flak." The operator smacked the panel, whispered a prayer in static. No drop tonight, no tins of milk, no bandoliers, no morphine. The cellar triage moaned under candle stubs that guttered in drafts. 1 wounded lad begged for water. The medic moistened his lips with condensation wiped from the enamel bowl. Close to midnight, rain intensified, serrated sheets that hammered roof tin and sluiced through smashed gutters. We hauled every viable vessel, helmets, mess tins, even Stanley's unused boots, outside to gather runoff. 10 minutes brought a pint each. Half was brown with soot, but we strained it through a sock, boiled it over peat. The taste of burnt wool and brick was preferable to thirst. Beyond the roar of rain, we heard a lorry engine kick over on the German side. Dull, resolute. Headlights snapped on, slitted for blackout. It lurched forward, shielding infantry huddled behind. Our Bren team asked for go-ahead. The sergeant hesitated, weighed rounds versus threat, then shook his head. We saved our fire. The enemy rolled closer, parked, switched off. Waiting game. inside a bigger waiting game. The piano in number 3 house struck notes again, this time deliberate. Someone over there had brushed the keys, maybe in passing. 3 low chords rolled out, rich and absurd amidst the rain. The sound floated across the lane, merged with thunder, dissolved. No shot punished the music. For 5 breaths, the war seemed to step aside and let something human breathe. Then a mortar thumped, enemy probing. Round whistled overhead, burst behind us, showering the triage roof in tiles. Screams followed, muffled. We sprinted, medics already dragging bodies through debris. 1 mortar, 3 casualties. Cost-benefit laid bare in crimson under candle flame. We used a whole morphine syringe on a lad screaming about his feet. Both gone below the knee, supplies reduced by 1/3. The rain slackened near dawn, leaving rooftops dripping like exhausted runners. We inventoried again. Bren belts down to 200 rounds, rifles to 39 cartridges, Sten mags to under 50 total. Water, 1 helmet, and a half bootful. Food, sardines, half tin, bully, jar brine. Morphine, 2. Grenades, 2. And still the bridge had to stand. The sergeant looked at each of us in turn, eyes reflecting candle stubs. "If Corps aren't here by tonight," he said, voice barely louder than drip, 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 "we'll plan for extraction. Boats, back channels, whatever floats. Until then, we bleed this place dry before we walk." Silence answered, a mix of agreement and resignation stitched by fatigue. Before first light, he sent me and a sapper to map routes to the water's edge. Alleys, cellars, storm drains, anything that ended at the Rhine. We crept through ruins, boots squelching mud, the hush of dawn broken only by distant cough of artillery. At the quay, the river looked wider than I remembered, inky black, kissed by thin fog. Water slapped stone like a patient hand. In that endless push-pull, I heard a promise. "Leave, and I will carry you. Tarry, and I will watch you drown." We turned back, minds etched with escape paths, hearts heavier for the knowing. The city behind us exhaled smoke and the iron stink of spent explosions. But the real emptiness lay in our pouches, our canteens, our stomachs. Supplies weren't just running low. They were deciding whether we lived long enough to see tomorrow's dawn. I crossed the cafe threshold as the sun smeared pale gold across the clouds, and the sergeant met my gaze. No question on his face. He saw the answer in my eyes, tasted it in the river scent clinging to my jacket. He nodded once, then handed me the last cigarette from the German case. We shared it, 2 drags each, exhaling into air thick with cordite ghosts, knowing the smoke cost nothing we hadn't already paid. Outside, the Germans readied another push, boots grinding rubble, bayonets flashing dully. Inside, our pockets felt like empty promises. Yet, when the sergeant raised his hand and whispered, "Positions," we moved, because empty or not, they were our pockets, and this was still our bridge. The next hours crawled past like wounded men, dragging themselves over broken glass. Sun, if the gray smear overhead deserved the name, climbed to some invisible zenith and slumped again without once throwing real warmth on the stones. We rotated watch and water, clinging to those routines because the ether, our trusted back channel to sense and purpose, had turned traitor. The radio operator sat cross-legged by the set, coat pulled tight, his face fixed in a frown so permanent it seemed carved. Each time he cracked the hand generator, he did it slower, as though fearing the answer he might stir. The speaker responded with nothing but restless static, a blizzard of white hiss that rose and fell like distant surf. Every so often a burst of dots and dashes flared, hopeful as a match in wind, only to fade before he could translate. He logged the time anyway, pencil tapping a rhythm of frustration on his knee. By early afternoon, the batteries had dipped to a needle's breadth above dead, and he shut the lid with a sigh that sounded like defeat. Word of the silence spread through our battered houses with the speed of infection. One lad swore he'd caught a fragment. XXX Corps halted before the signal vanished. Another insisted he'd made out Polish drop tonight. Nobody could prove or disprove, which made the rumors breed like flies. By the time they reached number 3 house, the story had swollen. The Poles were already across the river. The Highlanders were marching up the Utrechtse. Patton somehow had broken through from the south and would arrive in tanks painted with white stars big enough to see from the moon. We clung to whichever version hurt least, swapping lies the way children trade marbles, bright, useless tokens of imagined riches. The sergeant allowed the talk for a while, maybe thinking false hope beat none at all, but by dusk he clamped down. "Rumors are for pubs," he muttered, voice gravelly from smoke and thirst. "Out here they're bullets that curve back on the shooter." His order killed the gossip on our tongues, but not in our minds. The silence he demanded only gave fancies more room to echo between ears. Darkness pooled again, thicker than the night before, clouds blotting any moon. Rain returned in a hush fine as breath on glass, needling tin roofs and trickling into the cafe, where it tapped on upturned helmets lining the floor like bedraggled drums. The piano across the lane stayed silent, its ghost player either asleep, redeployed, or dead. That quiet worried me more than rifle fire. It felt like we'd slipped into a space even the music couldn't find. Somewhere beyond the bridge, a single flare climbed, flaring green instead of white. It hung, fizzed, died. The color set speculation off anew. Was green British or German tonight? No one knew. The code books were ash back at the DZ. 5 minutes later, another flare rose, this one red. Then silence. The color of confusion. Through the drizzle, we heard low voices on the German side, a chant-like cadence we couldn't translate. Maybe counting, maybe marching songs to mask fear. Their sappers hammered again, methodical, and occasionally a truck engine coughed, but still no big push. They were content to wait us dry. Our emptiness was time's ally now, not theirs. Inside, the wounded drifted between morphine dreams and whimpering wakefulness. We'd used the second-to-last syringe on a lad whose lungs whistled with every breath. Now the medic guarded the last one, like the crown jewels. He told the shivering private who begged for it to hold on a bit longer, just till the next drop, pal, even though we all knew no drop was coming tonight. The lie was a mercy. Lies can be that sometimes. Near midnight, a runner arrived from Frost's command post, helmet missing, sleeves soaked scarlet where linen failed. He delivered a note smeared with rain and blood. Maintain bridgehead at all costs. Expect Polish Brigade, South Bank tomorrow morning. Possible ferrying operation after dark. The sergeant read it under candlelight, jaw working. When the runner asked for morphine, the medic shook his head. And the lad went on, eyes glassy, clutching his arm as if it belonged to someone else. I volunteered for coastal watch, 2 hours stint on an attic perch overlooking the river bend. Climbing the splintered stairs, I passed a cracked nursery mirror and caught my reflection. Eyes sunken, cheeks gray, helmet caked in soot, chin bristle peppered white by plaster dust. I looked older than Dad had the last time I saw him, and I was 23. At the top, the attic window had lost its pane. Cold air poured through, smelling of wet slate and cordite. I settled behind the sill, rifle laid across a crate marked Hendrick's Lemonade, Export. The river below fused with sky, one charcoal slab, until faint reflections of burning warehouses drew orange scars across the current. In those scars I thought I saw shapes, perhaps boats, perhaps debris, perhaps wishful hallucination. Once, I swear, a parachute blossomed in far darkness, a white smear that floated, then folded, but another heartbeat showed nothing. Maybe a gull, maybe a ghost. I rubbed my eyes, told myself not to invent redeemers. Halfway through the watch, a quiet footstep made me swing the rifle, but it was only the sergeant, breath frosting in thin, moonless air. He squatted beside me, scanned the horizon. "Think they're still coming?" I asked before I could stop myself. His reply came after a long drag of cold silence. "Aye, someone is." He didn't sound convinced, but conviction required reserves he'd spent days ago. He left me with a squeeze on the shoulder, a pressure meant to plug the hole where belief leaked out. When I descended at rotation, I found the operator fiddling again with the radio. He'd stripped 2 torch batteries, jury-rigged them into the dying pack with wire sliced from a table lamp. Sparks kissed his fingers, but the set hummed at half strength. He grinned, a boyish flash. "Might snag something, if the ether's kind." We waited, breath held. For 20 blessed seconds, voices bled through, tinny overlapping. I caught "drill, riverbank, heavy flak, hold until..." Then, a roar of interference swallowed them whole. The operator sagged like a man, clubbed behind the knees. He turned one knob, then another. Silence. The batteries wheezed their last, filament red as cigarette ash. Dead again. Still, the fragment birthed fresh conjecture. Drill sat south of the river, 2 miles away. If someone mentioned it, maybe the Poles really had jumped. Maybe they huddled now in orchards, scrounging boats, planning to paddle across. The story sprinted, whisper fast, outpacing the sergeant's ban. Eyes brightened. Not much, but enough to spark a fragile energy. We used it. Men volunteered to drag the wounded deeper under cover, to reinforce number 3 house with scavenged doors, to boil another helmet of soot water. Everyone needed a task to clutch, something that looked forward instead of back. Dawn skipped sunrise altogether and stepped straight into gunmetal day. The Germans probed again, this time with mortars walking the street. Shells landed with practiced rhythm. 1, 2, 3, then silence while pipes adjusted. Dust avalanched off facades. A statue of some Dutch merchant toppled face first from its plinth, shattering on cobbles. Our answering fire was scant, 2 magazines from the Bren, a half-dozen rifle rounds. Then we ducked away, saving lead. After an hour, the barrage paused, replaced by a propaganda truck crawling up the far approach. A loudspeaker crackled. "English Soldaten, you are surrounded. Montgomery abandon you. Keep your lives. Surrender." We answered with laughter, ragged, genuine, and a single round through the speaker that turned its message to squeals. The truck reversed hastily, tires slithering on wet stone. Mockery could still feed us, even while rations couldn't. By noon, our thirst returned to dominate everything. The sergeant dispatched a pair to the key pipes. They came back empty-handed, valves rusted, mains dry. They did, however, bring a rumor. They'd seen red berets moving in the ruins beyond the bridge. Ours or Poles, couldn't say. From that moment, every shadow in distant doorways was a potential ally. Hope switched uniforms as needed, no questions asked. An hour later, a signal rocket arced from the south bank, blue star cluster curling above fog. We'd no idea whose code used blue. Some claimed it was ours, some swore German armor did the same. Arguments flared, turning sharper than bullets, until the sergeant thundered them down with a curse. "Blue means keep your bloody eyes open," he snapped. That translation sufficed. As afternoon waned, the piano played again, broken, hesitant scales. Then a raspy voice accompanied, mumbling words none of us knew. We poked heads from loopholes, listening. The song faltered, restarted, faltered again. Sniper fire never came. I imagined a lone German soldier, fingers dusty with plaster, prodding keys because music anchored him to the life he'd left. The tune petered out with a final chord that hung in the wet air longer than any shell burst. Twilight draped the ruins, and fresh rumors stalked out. Tanks were on the bridge to the south. Polish paras had ferried 30 men across using doors lashed to barrels. Frost had called artillery on his own position. Each tale contradicted the last. None found proof, but faith accepted them anyway. The operator dismantled the radio for the third time, chasing faults like a man looking for God under floorboards. I went to number 3 house to relieve the Brin team. Found only one man left upright, trousers damp to the knee in someone else's blood, staring through a crack at the enemy lines, shrouded in dusk smoke. He didn't speak when I touched his arm, only nodded and crawled away like a wind-up toy sprung out. The Brin barrel lay too hot to hold bare, browned with residue. I swapped out, tucked the warm metal beneath wet rag, scanned the shadows. In the failing light, I caught movement on the water, several dots, dark against sludge gray. Boats, logs, my heart kicked. I pulled binoculars, liberated from a dead German officer, glass cracked but usable. Through them I saw canvas coracles, 6 perhaps, rowing hard against current. The figures inside wore smocks I couldn't identify in the gloom. Some had helmets, some berets darker than maroon, dampened by night. No flag. They hugged the far bank, slipping behind a spur of warehouse before I could gather witnesses. When I lowered the glasses, the river looked empty as before, ripples erasing tracks. I kept the sight to myself at first, unsure if I'd glimpsed salvation or mirage conjured by wish, but the image gnawed. When the sergeant crawled over, I told him. He said nothing, tapped his cigarette twice on the parapet, then ordered runners to alert every sector. Eyes on river, friendlies possible, hold fire till certain. That last clause tasted foreign. Days of shoot first doctrine were hard to shelve. We repeated it anyway. Hold fire. identify, hold fire. Night closed its fist tighter than any yet. Rain ceased, leaving air newly brittle. In that crisp hush, the radio operator tried one final time, feeding power from a hand-wound dynamo he'd cobbled from a child's bicycle found in rubble. Sparks leapt, the speaker whined, and at last, through the hiss, a voice slid out, faint but undeniable.
Polish 1st, South Shore, cannot cross. Enemy armor on bridge. Hold until...
The message fractured into shards, but the meaning flickered like a lamp in a tomb. The Poles were real, pinned, calling to ghosts they hoped were still alive on the North Bank. Us. We had no transmitter juice to answer. We could only cling to the knowledge that across the black water our own kind waited, thirsty and frayed, whispering rumors of us the same way we whispered theirs. The operator slumped back, eyes shining with exhausted triumph. "They're out there," he breathed. Not a rumor this time, a heartbeat of fact amid the static. We gathered on the cafe floor, what was left of us, and passed the news hand to hand like the last ration. It filled us not with strength, but with a stubbornness sharper than hunger. Hold one more night, fire one more controlled burst, trust one more shadow to be a friend. Above, the girders of the bridge glimmered with dew, silver scars under starless sky. Somewhere beyond, German armor idled, Polish boats bobbed, British tanks crawled through blocked roads, and every wireless valve in Europe hummed half-truths into the dark. Our own ether had gone silent again, but the rumors had finally met their match in a single cracked transmission that said simply, "You are not alone." That was enough to send us back to the windows, rifles propped, eyes bruised but open, listening to the static between mortar thumps, waiting for dawn, or for the hush that might follow a last unknown order. Dawn seeped into Arnhem like thin milk through dirty muslin, and the city woke with a cough. The mist that had ghosted the rooftops all week now pressed lower, pooling in shell craters, blurring doorways into pale smudges. Somewhere, a church bell clanged twice, then fell silent, maybe knocked askew by blast or bullet, maybe rung by someone desperate for God's ear. Either way, the note hung in the fog like a coin spinning on edge, then clattered out. We'd counted the night a victory because we were still upright, but the Germans clearly counted it a dress rehearsal. At first light, their mortars resumed, slow, deliberate thumps stepping across the riverfront, feeling for soft timber. One round punched number 3 house dead center, spraying piano keys onto the road like ivory confetti. Another burst stitched our cafe roof. The jukebox finally gave up its rusted grip and crashed through a joist in a howl of bent metal and broken glass. The wounded downstairs howled in chorus. We slapped dust off helmets, spat grit, and braced for the next act. It arrived on foot, Gray figures materialized in 2s and 3s out of the vapor, rifles low, bayonets glinting with mist. Textbook, street-clearing drill. They strode in quick bounds, hugging rubble and burnt cars, covering one another with tight fire. These weren't the cobbled-together second-liners we'd bloodied on Monday. This lot moved like men who'd rehearsed on model villages. Word skittered down our shattered terraces. Fallschirmjäger, paratrooper against paratrooper. Different silk, same madness. Our Bren crew opened with a 2-second burst that chewed the corner of a bakery facade into flour-white dust. The Germans ducked, returned fire in short, disciplined snaps. Bullets tinged off lampposts, flicked shards from tram rails. Broken glass under our boots popped as we shifted position. Tiny betrayals swallowed by the racket. The sergeant yelled for me and 2 others to push right, block them from flanking the cafe. We bolted across the street, feet skidding on damp cobbles, breath sharp in chilled lungs. Fog swallowed us 3 steps out, turned the world to silhouettes and footfalls. Halfway over, I trod on a spent cartridge. It rolled, I stumbled, and a sniper's round tore the air where my head had been. Instinct threw me flat behind the charred hulk of a delivery van. Metal still stank of burnt oil. Rainwater sizzled on it where some ember lingered. The private behind me, Hewitt, lunged to the van's other door, boots crunching glass. A German voice barked ahead, too close. Hewitt lobbed one of our last Mills bombs blind. The grenade clacked off brick and exploded 20 yards up the lane, the blast muffled by the fog, but the screams crisp. Shrapnel rang on shop shutters like hail. We pushed, weaving between stalled bicycles and chunks of masonry, rifles at hip height. A shop sign, Sean Macquarie, swung overhead, chain squeaking. The fog parted just enough to reveal a paratrooper in field gray kneeling beside a doorway, reloading an MP-40. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, 2 reflections of the same insanity. Then my Lee Enfield bucked. He jerked back, slumped across his weapon, the magazine still half-seated. His helmet rolled, tapping the curb before settling in a puddle that mirrored a slice of broken sky. We cleared the shoe shop, nothing but toppled laths, the leather smell overrun by cordite, and broke through to a rear alley. There the fog thinned, and we saw our bridge again, ribs of steel fading into white. German infantry were fanning south around our perimeter, using row houses for cover, intending to box us away from the span. Frost's northern abutment was now a lonely island of sandbags and wrecked lorries, flags of smoke marking each hit. The radio set in my pouch rattled. Silence still. The batteries had died for good at dawn. We fought now with rumor for orders and gut instinct for maps. Hewitt pointed to an intact sewer lid midway down the lane. Escape hatch, he grinned. A joke with no laughter left. We left it be, for tonight's withdrawal maybe, but the knowledge warmed like contraband whiskey. On Utrechtse the firefight thickened to a roar. Walls spat brick dust fountains where MG-42 belts stitched them. We sprinted doorway to doorway, world reduced to the next 3-yard rush and the wet slap of boots. At the corner, a sniper round shattered a drain pipe over my head. Cold water doused my collar, stinging like needles. We ducked into a tobacconist's, counters smashed, the air pungent with shredded leaf, and kicked holes through the plaster party wall into the adjoining haberdashery. House to house became wall to wall. Punch, crawl, pop shots, crawl again. A rat the size of a hare bolted between our knees. None of us flinched. Shells made better alarms. Past midday, the fog lifted enough to let daylight pour harsh on broken brick. With it came Stuka-like screams, low-angle Nebelwerfer rockets from beyond the river. They crashed 2 streets back, setting a row of townhouses alight. Flames licked broken stairwells, window glass bubbled, ran molten. Smoke rolled into the sky, blotting out the thinning mist with thicker, blacker promise. Ash snowed sideways on the drizzle. Through the shimmer, we glimpsed anti-tank guns trundled forward by half-tracks, their muzzles already searching the bridge. Our Piat sat defunct back at the cafe. I felt smaller than ever, boots slipping on soot, ears ringing, fingers numb from firing pin bite. Hewitt's Bren jammed. We stripped the cover off on a doorstep while bullets whined past, found the extractor claw broken. No spares. The Bren, our backbone, was dead weight now. He cursed it gentle, like burying a dog. Orders, filtered by breathless runner, hold the line from number 3 house to the gutted tram, no retreat beyond second crossroads. Runners were dying faster than ammo. They used chalk on broken doors to mark new boundaries. Some of the chalk lines already dripped pink where rain mixed with brick dust and blood. Street by street, room by room, the Germans inched forward. Our rifles answered slower. Squeeze, count cost, shift position. We'd gone from measured bursts to single shots, from single shots to threats muttered through teeth. A grenade toss became a vote of no confidence. We had 2 ballots left. Mid-afternoon, distant engines rumbled deeper. Armor, multiple, coming up the Apeldoornseweg. The sergeant squinted through blown-out sash and spoke what we were all thinking. If they push those panzers onto the bridge, we're done before supper. He passed me his last clip. 5 rounds, gingerly, as though they might crumble in rough hands. Save them for helmets, not smoke. We fell back 1 terrace, trading altitude for walls that could still stand another shell. Broken glass under my soles rasped each step. The sound set my teeth on edge. In the new position, a second-floor bedroom with the roof stripped away. The air smelled of charred mattress springs and damp plaster. A child's book lay open on the floor, color pictures of farm animals skipping across unmarked pages. Bullet holes marched through the cow and the goose, leaving the pig untouched. I turned the book face down, angry at its innocence. Across the street, German paratroopers stormed a greengrocer's, bayonets flashing. Our lone smoke grenade bought us 30 seconds to reposition. Olive haze billowed, stinging eyes. Within it, I heard British voices shouting distances, German voices replying in curses. Shots cracked, unseen. When the fog thinned, I saw a young German clinging to a windowsill, legs shredded, crying, "Mutti!" until a second Bren stitched him silent. No sides now, just men, ground finer than the rubble beneath them. Toward evening, the drizzle hardened into cold rain. It beat on exposed beams, drummed on helmets, slicked rifle stocks. Mud on the street turned to brown glass. Boots slipped, bodies slid. Blood diluted to rust-colored streams, trickling toward storm drains, already clogged with plaster shards and leaves. Somewhere, a radio, probably German, crackled a marching band tune. Cheerful, surreal. Hewitt hummed along under his breath until I elbowed him quiet. We fell back again, not by order, but by simple arithmetic. Too few of us to plug the holes, opening like rot in cheese. Each building became a tooth we lost. We spat them out and felt the gum behind grow tender. At the bend where the tram lay on its side, we made one last line. Sandbags had burst, their entrails of soggy earth spilling onto track. We piled crates, door frames, anything to plug gaps. The sergeant gathered our 6 remaining rifles, no automatics now, and spaced us 10 paces apart. "Fire slow," he said, voice barely traversing shell roar. "Make them think our line's thicker." He paused, rain running rivers off the brim of his helmet, and finally admitted what none of us had voiced. "When they start pushing tanks, we fall to the bridge. Last stand. Frost's orders." No one asked how we'd stop armor on the deck with rifles. The question hung in the rain with the ashes. Light faded. Street lamps, long dead, stood like skeletal sentries, drenched in oil slick. We took turns firing, the sergeant calling targets as silhouettes flickered behind debris. Each trigger pull echoed in wrists, a jolt up weary arms. Cartridges clinked on stone, precious coins spent. German tracer cracked over our heads now, green comets marking paths for mortar tubes to follow. A shell landed short, blew the top off a privy. The stink of sewage joined cordite and wet cement. During a lull, Hewitt nipped behind the tram, returned with a canteen half filled with rainwater caught in its roof gutter. We passed it lip to lip, mud swirling inside. It tasted of smoke and salvation. When it reached me, the swirl had settled. I drank the dregs anyway, mud gritty on teeth. Night nudged full dark. The Germans paused again, perhaps regrouping, perhaps waiting for armor to nose forward. Quiet, stacked heavy. From the north abutment we heard faint Bren bursts. The lads there still bit. From the river came rhythmic slaps, water against hulls, boats maybe, poles maybe, or just driftwood banging pilings. Static still crawled in my switched-off headset, memory more than sound. The sergeant tapped shoulders, time to slip back. One by one, we crab-walked through back gardens, rifles hugged tight. Broken glass under boots sounded like ice in winter ponds. We skirted a crater filled with filthy water. A German soldier lay face down in it, hair waving like weed. His helmet rested beside him, brim catching rain. I lifted it, thought of using it for scooping water, then set it back gently. At the bridge approach, the scene was madness by torch glow. Frost's HQ now sprawled across a warren of sandbag nests and lorry hulks scabbed with scrap metal. Wounded lay in rows, blankets soaked through. A padre knelt over each, murmuring, words lost to wind. Engineers staggered under boxes of explosives. If armor crossed, they meant to drop the span under friend and foe alike. Desperation had replaced doctrine. We slotted into a parapet beside a corporal with bandaged head who laughed too loudly at nothing. Our rifles pointed down the avenue we'd just ceded, the Germans hidden by rain dark. But we could feel their breath inches beyond the mist. Behind us, the Rhine slapped embankment stone, impatient. The sergeant leaned close, voice hoarse. "This is it. Street fighting's done. Next round's on the bridge." He clapped my shoulder with a hand trembling from cold or fatigue or fear, likely all. Somewhere behind the German line, an engine revved, deep, armor-rich. Another joined, harmonizing doom. Headlights flared briefly, then snapped dark. Through the rain, I heard tracks clatter over broken brick, inching forward. The German infantry began their low chant again, a growling cadence, echoing off gutted walls. We crouched, dry-firing courage into empty chambers, waiting for the shadows to coalesce into panzers. The last grenade rested warm in my palm, pin loop cold on tongue as I kissed it for luck, an old glider pilot superstition I'd mocked days ago. Water slapped the quay behind me like a drum roll announcing the final act. German tracks ground closer, iron thunder creeping. I glanced at the sergeant. He gave a tight nod toward the deck, a silent promise that whatever came next, we would meet it on those steel ribs. Boots shifted on shattered glass, rifles leveled in trembling hands, whispered orders melted into the drizzle, and on the far side of the smoke, the street we'd bled for spat sparks of muzzle flash as the enemy surged. We exhaled as one and opened fire into the oncoming dark.
The world funneled to the width of the bridge deck, steel ribs overhead, tarmac underfoot, black water sliding beneath like an unspoken threat. I could smell the river now, dank and metallic, mixing with cordite, wet tar, and the sour stench of sweat-soaked khaki. Rain slanted through the lattice of girders, each drop catching the yellow flare of signal lamps before spattering the roadway in luminous pinpricks. Somewhere aft, Major Frost's whistle shrilled once, slicing the night. Every man to firing slots. No one fires early. We crouched along sandbag walls, shoved against the railings, rifles poking through murder holes cut in scrap metal. On the far shore, German armor clanked unseen, slow, deliberate, like predators confident the prey could run no farther. Floodlights snapped on behind their line, stabbing white spears through fog and drizzle. The beam skimmed across our span, illumining twisted lorry hulks, the broken tram still jammed at 45 degrees, wheel sets frozen in rust. Light swept on, found our parapet. We ducked, but shadows betrayed us. Jagged silhouettes cast huge against wet girders. Mortar tubes barked at once, rounds whistled overhead and burst among the wrecks behind, thunderclaps that shook rivets in my boots. Shrapnel pinged off plate like hail on a greenhouse roof. My breath hitched, lungs had shrunk to the size of cartridge cases. The sergeant tapped my shoulder, 2 quick pats, then jabbed a finger forward. 1st Panzer rolled into view, shielded by foot soldiers spread in arrow formation. Headlights off, but its low silhouette was unmistakable. Mark IV, skirts dented, barrel nosing left, right, like a dog scenting fear. Behind it clattered a pair of half-tracks, bristling with MG-42s, their muzzles spat green tracer that arced down the deck, ricochets skittering sparks along ironwork. The infantry advanced in the gaps, crouched and steady, bayonets glittering under floodlight glare. "Hold," the sergeant rasped, voice sandpaper on stone. My index finger whitened where it curled round the trigger. The Lee Enfield's front sight wobbled over a helmet until I forced the shake still. Rain drummed time in the barrel grooves. Somewhere to my left, a wounded Bren gunner muttered Ave Marias under his breath, the rhythm almost soothing, like the ticking of a bomb you know hasn't exploded yet.
The tank clawed forward 15-20 yards. Tension stretched so tight the air itself vibrated, and then Frost's whistle shrieked, a note that cracked open every nerve. 4 Piat teams sprang from foxholes, reserve tubes saved for this one moment. The first bomb whooshed, its tail sparking orange. It struck the glacis plate and bounced off like a kicked tin. Dud, or bad angle. Second shot hit lower, detonated with a gout of yellow flame. The Panzer lurched, but kept coming, commander ducking into his cupola. The third Piat misfired altogether, spring-jammed in mud. The fourth found the track sprocket in a flash of white-hot light, shearing it clean. The beast slewed sideways, grinding metal on metal, turret shrieking as it slewed toward our parapet. "Now!" The sergeant's shout drowned beneath a volley of grenades. We hurled every Mills left. The explosive curve lit orange against floodlights. Bursts peppered the crippled tank. Fragment spray shredding the infantry sheltering near its skirts. Screams ripped through the downpour. Our rifles followed, methodical, every shot chosen. I watched a German paratrooper reel backward, chest blooming dark. Another spun as if windmilled by invisible hands. Tracer from the half-tracks zipped over us, green sewing needle stitching air. One round punched the sandbags inches above my cheek. Clay sprayed, stinging like hornets. The disabled Panzer's hull gun chattered, bullets smashing sandbags to earth. Someone 2 slots left of me went limp. I saw only his boots twitch, then still. The turret roared, main gun firing point blank. The shells screamed past, hit the tram carcass behind, and the whole vehicle erupted, timbers, glass, leftover current collectors blown skyward. A wave of heat slapped our backs, followed by the metallic smell of vaporized copper. The half-tracks tried to skirt the crippled tank, but engineers leapt from cover, thrusting satchel charges under front wheels. White flash, deafening crack. Both vehicles burst into clangor and flame, hurling wheels like spinning moons into the river below. Burning fuel splashed across the deck. Rain hissed on it, but could not smother. German infantry scattered, some rolling in puddles, uniforms ablaze. Others lay flat, rifles forgotten, stunned by fire and thunder. For a heartbeat the assault stalled. Screams, crackling fire, the whoosh of rain on burning rubber. Frost's voice rang thin. "Keep at them, lads! Make it cost!" We obeyed, rifles snapping, Stens rattling short tragic notes. A subaltern sprinted forward with a boy's ATR salvaged from somewhere, braced it on a sandbag, and fired point blank into the Panzer's flank. The round shrieked off, useless, but sparks distracted the turret gunner long enough for a corporal to lob a gammon bomb into the commander's hatch. The explosion blew the cupola lid 20 feet skyward. Black smoke geysered after. Cheers burst ragged from our line, half joy, half disbelief. But the floodlights beyond answered by brightening, multiples now, revealing more silhouettes. Another tank, 2 maybe, and a tide of helmeted shapes marching to the tempo of distant drums. Relief evaporated like steam from the smoldering decks.
50 yards, someone shouted. 2 more Panzers. I cycled my bolt, felt brass eject, one of my last 5. The next round chambered with an ominous reluctance, as if even the rifle knew the odds. I sighted on the leading half-track commander, squeezed. The man jerked, vanished down inside. 4 rounds left. A fresh mortar barrage landed short, throwing sheets of water and splinters over our parapet. The force shoved me against the rail. For a moment, the bridge tilted and spun, and I tasted iron dust. When vision steadied, the sergeant was dragging our only remaining Piat from a broken ammo crate, hands slick with rain and blood. He knelt in open deck light,
oblivious to enemy fire, jammed the bomb on the spigot and shouted for someone to cock the spring. Hewitt vaulted across, muscles corded, hauled back the lever with a grunt. They swung the tube like a drunken pipe organ toward the advancing tank. I fired again, third round, at tracer that streaked toward Hewitt. Hit or no hit, the tracer bent away. A breath later, the PIAT coughed. The bomb sailed low, struck a track link, and disappeared under belly armor. For half a second, nothing. Then, the tank belly burst upward, fire punching through hatches. A shockwave flung Sargent and Hewitt backward like rag dolls. Flame rolled across the deck, reflecting amber off rain-wet girders. My ears rang numb. Sounds came muffled, as though water filled them. I crawled to the sergeant, helmet cracked, eyes wide, but alive. Hewitt, too, bleeding from nose, laughing a cracked laugh. Their faces told me nothing good, but both still gripped weapons. That was currency enough.
Beyond the patch of burning wreckage, I saw German infantry regroup in the lee of the next panzer, this one intact. Their officers waved forward, gesturing for flank push along the pedestrian walkway. If they gained that side path, they'd rake us lengthwise. Frost realized, too. He sent a whistle blast, and 3 men dashed to block the alley of girders, one carrying a 2-inch mortar tube with only smoke rounds left. They dropped a pot just ahead of the German vanguard. White cloud billowed, buying seconds. Not minutes, seconds. I felt motion at my knees, radio operator crawling, clutching the dead handset like a relic. He pressed it to his ear out of habit. Static, then miracle, faint Morse again. His eyes flared. He shoved the earpiece toward me, and though the roar swallowed most, I caught fragments. Boat teams, North Bank, midnight window. Then static swallowed all. He wept, whether from hope or hopelessness, I couldn't say. Midnight window, that meant withdrawal orders had finally cut through the ether. But midnight was hours off, and every minute weighed a pound of flesh. We fought now for the privilege of retreat. German grenades clattered near the walkway, rolled spinning like poisonous toys. Lances of fire erupted. 2 paras shredded, silhouettes disintegrating in orange. The walkway defenders fell back, faces blackened. The enemy poured forward, MG-42 set up behind the intact tank, barrel already glowing. Its scream tore the night, bullets sawing rivets off railings. Sparks cascaded like New Year fireworks. I pressed cheek to wet sandbag, aimed for the gunner's faint outline, squeezed. 4. He jerked sideways. Another took his place. I reached for last cartridge, 5th, slotted it, shot again. Miss, or maybe it lodged in the shield. Empty. The rifle bolt ran forward on nothing but rainwater and despair. No mags, no loose rounds. Around me, men scavenged pockets with frantic hands, sharing single cartridges like cigarettes in prison. The MG tore a line through our parapet. A Bren team, one of the final pairs, rose to return fire, got 2 bursts before tracers cut them down, weapon clanging off the bridge edge and plunging into the dark. Their deaths ripped a hole in the line, big enough to march through. Germans surged at it, yelling, boots splashing in puddles of fuel. With no ammo left, save bayonet and rage, I grabbed a Molotov, wine bottle, petrol, rag, sparked it off the tram's burning chassis, and heaved. The flaming arc painted the rain vivid orange, smashed at the lead soldier's boots. Fire rolled under others, igniting soaked uniforms surprisingly quick.
Screams mounted, their momentum stuttered, but the intact Panzer chose that moment to swing its turret directly at our command nest. I watched the muzzle steady, the wet steel glistening in flicker firelight. There was no Piat, no gammon, nothing but 2 sapper charges wired for remote and a detonator box in Major Frost's hand. I saw his silhouette against flame, thumb hesitating over the plunger. Blow the span, and we sever ourselves from any midnight escape. Hold, and the tank's next shell might shear us clean off the map. He looked to the heavens, or the girders overhead, same thing now, then lowered his gaze, eyes tracking across the parapet faces, counting souls left. His jaw set. He raised the box, thumb edging closer. My heartbeat thundered louder than the MG. A piercing whistle cut through, the distinctive 2-note Allied signal we hadn't heard in days. It floated from the river gloom, followed by the slap of oars and the creak of wood against current. Voices, British, Polish, shouted through rain, "Hold your fire! Friendly boat parties inbound!" The Panzer's turret paused, as if the gunner too heard the call. Frost's thumb froze millimeters from detonation. All eyes pivoted to the river, where lanterns flickered low, tiny amber stars bobbing toward our quay. Hope rode in, fragile and late, across water that gleamed with burning fuel. The MG resumed, stuttering spite, but its rounds sailed high, gunner rattled by distraction. German infantry hesitated, glancing toward the unexpected lights. Our line, though bleeding and half unarmed, found enough breath to cheer, a hoarse, ragged noise that felt pulled from the earth itself. Shell shock hammered my skull, yet clarity cut through. Midnight window was no longer a rumor. Those boats meant exfil, if we could live until they touched stone. I slammed a fresh bayonet onto my rifle lug, ceremony for a weapon with no bullets, and sucked air thick with smoke. German officers barked orders. Panic and insistence mingled. The intact Panzer backed into floodlight glare, turret seeking targets among shadows. The bridge groaned as though aware it might soon be torn apart by charges or by steel tracks. Water slapped brick in quickening tempo, like a drummer anxious to cue the next scene. Frost lowered the plunger box. For now. Features lit by dancing fire, he bellowed down the line, voice ragged yet unbroken. "Hold on, lads. Boats are coming. Last stand till the whistle, then we go." The order surged through our wrecked ranks, lighting what ammunition could not. We rose behind fractured sandbags, blades gleaming in torchlight, empty rifles brandished like pikes, Molotovs cradled like newborns. Rain hissed on hot metal, steam coiling between us and them, masking numbers, amplifying hearts. Across the deck, the Germans braced, bayonets lowered, every shadow taut with intent. Between us lay a carpet of spent shells, broken wood, and the glowing remains of men and machines, all reflecting floodlight beams into accusing constellations.
Wind off the river, swirled smoke past my face, bitter, oily, alive. Beneath it, I caught the oar-cough rhythm drawing closer, closer, each stroke a promise we might yet trade this bridge of ghosts for the uncertain darkness beyond the water. The Panzer's cannon elevated, grinding steel on steel. Our muzzles, empty or not,
aligned in echo. Both sides froze for a breath stretched thin as violin string. Somewhere behind, a wounded para began to sing, voice reedy but steady. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when. The cannon fired, the deck lit white. I felt myself shout a warning lost in the thunder, and as the blast wave hurled sparks into the rain and the bridge screamed in iron agony, a single note from Frost's whistle sliced the chaos, high and fierce, the signal to prepare for the break. We dropped behind shattered barriers, hearts ratcheting, while oars thumped ever nearer through smoke. The bridge shuddered, men staggered, and the final act balanced on a heartbeat's edge between holding another minute and leaping into the watery night to come. A shiver ran along the bridge's spine, iron complaining in a rising groan. Then the girders settled again, dripping sparks into darkness where the shell had punched clean through the roadbed and out the far railing. Smoke clawed at our throats, thick with cordite and pulverized concrete, but the whistle's call still rang in our skulls. Stand ready for the break. No one spoke. Even the wounded bit back sound, as if noise alone might tip the balance between life and drowning. Down by the quay, the first boat bumped stone. Canvas covered a salt craft just big enough for a section, oars flashing dull in lantern glow. Polish voices urge, hush, hush, the consonants hissing like steam. Their lieutenant, barely more than a silhouette, signaled with an upturned palm. 2 fingers, 2 minutes before the next craft followed. That was the window. Haul ourselves through night and water before the panzers rumbled past the burning wreck and crushed the deck beneath our boots. Frost tracked time on a cracked pocket watch held to the fire's glow. When the second hand struck the mark, he raised a clenched fist, dropped it. The line pivoted like a living hinge, front ranks peeling from sandbags, stepping over spent casings and bodies still cooling in rain, moving in pairs for cover of the tram hulk. I slung my useless Lee Enfield, gripped Hewitt's elbow, and we half-dragged the sergeant between us. His left leg dragged uselessly, trousers soaked dark down to the boot. He cursed the bridge with every breath, yet insisted he could walk. We pretended to believe him.
Halfway to the ramp, the MG-42 shrieked again. New team, fresh belt. Rounds zipped low, ricocheting off rails in petulant sparks. We dropped flat, water sheeting across my cheek like ice. A flare burst overhead, bleaching everything bone white. Shadows of men, crates, shattered vehicles sprawled like negatives on the deck. In that merciless glare, I saw a Polish sapper sprinting toward us, face shiny with sweat, fists pumping. He hurled something past, the telltale stub of a smoke pot, and a hiss of phosphorus bloomed, gifting us 10 yards of temporary night. We crawled, knees scraping tar, fingers slick with rain oil. Smoke wrapped us in clammy embrace. Inside its veil, sound was muffled. World narrowed to feet and boots and the drumbeat of my own panic. At the ramp, a corporal waved frantically, boat nearly full. Frost appeared, coat torn, blood streak across temple, ushering lads aboard with a schoolmaster's urgency. "Move, you ugly beggars, move!" 2 stretcher cases slid in first. The boat rocked. Water slopped over gunwale. Oarsmen cursed softly.
Hewitt shoved the sergeant forward. I helped lower him beside the wounded, then turned back, still space for one more. 2 privates clattered up behind, eyes wide, breath ragged. I felt myself step aside, let them squeeze past. Boat crews shoved off at once, rope untied, blades dipping with synchronized sighs. Hull rasped stone, then slipped free into black water, lantern darkened to a pinprick, swallowed by mist. My gut twisted as the sergeant's silhouette shrank into the haze, half of my anchor leaving on a river that smelled of rust and regret. A new burst of fire raked the quay. Bullets hammering stair walls. We hugged the stone, heads down. Frost's voice behind me. Second lift, make it count. I glanced left. The bridge mouth now glowed hellish orange where burning fuel licked puddles. Spocks floated skyward like diseased fireflies, German troops massed beyond the crippled panzer, rallying for a fresh rush. One officer stood on the hull, brandishing pistol, goading them on. Our last Bren, manned by a kid whose name I couldn't recall, stitched the scene. 2 Germans fell. The rest ducked but kept forming. Time contracted. Somewhere upriver, a Nebelwerfer salvo whooshed, the rockets streaking overhead to smash the far bank, where Poles still tried launching more boats. Crimson geysers clawed skyward. A brief cheer rose from German lines. I felt the quay tremble through my boots. Even the river seemed to recoil, slapping walls harder, as if urging us to choose water or iron. The second boat emerged from gloom, shoved by 3 Poles ankle-deep, noses barely clear of the gunwale. They halted up the slipway, breath steaming. Frost signaled me. "Load casualties first," he murmured, voice frayed to wire. I sprinted back toward the aid post, really just a doorway draped in a grenade-shredded blanket. Inside, lantern glow revealed horror. Half the cellar floor underwater, wounded stacked on boards like cordwood. The medic knelt, sleeves crimson, holding a compress to a lad's belly that rose and fell in shallow hiccups. "We can take 4, I said. His eyes flicked to me, blank for a beat, then he nodded. We chose by quick, cruel maths, those who could sit upright, bleed slow, answer a whisper. 2 heaved themselves over our shoulders. 1 stretcher we carried between. The 4th, a boy with both legs splinted, gripped my sleeve. "Not leaving me?" Tears cut tracks through soot. "We'll fetch another boat," I lied. He smiled, a lopsided trust, and let go. Outside, thunder of engines, panzer gear jangling, a gearbox's angry grind. The Germans were forcing their crippled comrade off the carriageway, clearing path. Heat washed across the bridge as flames climbed higher, reflecting in puddles like portals. My crew staggered to the boat. Poles tugged them aboard, hands steady as surgeons. Hewitt appeared, face streaked, hurling his last Molotov back toward the panzer line. It burst against a half-track, adding more smoke to night's broth. Halfway loaded, the boat still waited one space. Frost waved me in. Behind him a gust blew, flaring debris. For a second, bridge, river, sky, all fused into searing tableau. My foot hit gunwale, then a scream cut across. "Radio!" The operator, our ferret of static, staggered from smoke with the set lashed to his back by field dressing, antenna dragging sparks where it scraped deck.
MG rounds chased him, skipping off stone like angry rain. He tripped near the ramp, set clanging. I vaulted back, grabbed the harness, yanked him under cover of the stair niche. His face was bloodless, lips blue, eyes burning with single-minded duty. "Orders! Proof!" he panted. Frost's whistle shrilled, one short, one long. "Launch now." The Poles shouted we were overweight. I shoved the operator across thwarts, radio clutched. Hewitt grabbed my sleeve, tried to drag me after. But the corporal who'd loaded first casualties was already pushing off. Pole braced, boat teetering. No more room. Water lapped gunwale. Someone behind cried, "Next lift, 2 minutes." So Hewitt and I stepped back, boots sinking in river slime, as the channel swallowed our second boat. Oars dipped, blades vanished in black. Fog folded in, their silhouette dissolved into ghost smudge. The quay felt suddenly cavernous without them. Up on the bridge, the German charge began in earnest. Infantry rushed under spasms of tracer, stepping over their fallen, kicking aside burning debris. The intact panzer rolled slow, turret traversing. Engineers clutched detonator wire at Frost's elbow, but the boats still hung between banks. If the bridge went now, they'd be swamped in tidal backlash. Frost hesitated, lips moving in silent arithmetic. "Covering party, ready," he barked. That was us, the dregs with blades, smoke bombs, handful of 303s. We'd hold while last boats loaded, then race for whatever remained. I felt weird calm settle. Once a decision's made, fear finds no perch. Hewitt slapped my helmet. "See you on the river." I nodded, grinned despite ash crusting my teeth. We fanned behind crates stacked against quay wall, rifle bolts worked, cigarettes spat out before lighting showed the whites of eyes. Rain eased, leaving the night disturbingly clear. Flames on bridge popped and crackled, outlines of steel ribs stark against sky. German machine guns spat from walkway landing. Bullets sparked off stone above our heads, showering grit. Poles appeared again, dragging third boat, a larger assault craft scarred by shrapnel, patchworked with tape. They splashed through shallows, shouted for casualties. We had none left mobile. Frost waved fresh defenders in, my turn, Hewitt's, 6 others. Hearts thudding, we slunk from cover, feet skidding on algae-slick steps. A spotlight caught us, bridge tower beam pivoting, white glare froze the world, rifles hammered, water plumed beside the boat. A Polish oarsman toppled backward, oar clattering. We rammed our shoulders under hull, shoved until it floated free. Frost stood on slipway, Tommy gun barking one-handed into light, daring it to kill him. The beam jerked away. Someone somewhere flinched first. "Go!" Frost roared. We piled in, hull rocking crazily. Water sloshed ankle-deep, bullet holes punched earlier. 2 Poles bailed with helmets while others grabbed oars. I wrapped fingers round gunwale, cold sting grounding me. Hewitt knelt by a bow, rifle over shoulder, though its magazine was a placebo. Another burst from the bridge, stitched spray across stern, a round punched through transom, splintering wood. The coxswain cursed, bent to patch with bare palm. Oars bit current. We slid away, stern yawing until rhythm settled.
The key slipped behind, silhouettes of our last covering friends blinking in muzzle flashes. Above them Frost gestured, "Down-river, get clear." Then he and 3 sappers bolted up the steps toward detonator wires, intent on wiping what remained of Arnhem Bridge from any map still clinging to optimism. Midstream, spray hit my face, cold, pure. I risked a glance back. The span loomed giant, flames licking its ribs, German tracers skipping like angry sprites along parapet. Tiny shadow of Frost dashed across deck, wires trailing. A flare arced, German green, illuminating all. Bridge crawling with figures, our own lads still swapping bullets for seconds. Oars churned harder, water slapped hull in rapid applause. Ahead, South Bank grew from blur to solid shape. Trees twisted, branches drooping into river like welcoming arms. Somewhere in their dark, the Poles waited, rifles pointed outward to guard our landing. Behind, a boom, muffled, then rising, an iron roar. Light flared orange-white, pillars of fire stabbing sky. The bridge's midsection erupted, girders snapping like toy sticks, roadway flipping up, then folding inward. Shockwave chased us, slapped backs, hurled spray over heads. Oarsmen almost lost rhythm, hull slewed but stayed afloat. We gaped as the great arch sagged, one side still clinging, the other cascading sparks into water. German shouts pitched to panic. The roar echoed off riverbanks like rolling artillery, then dwindled into crackling fragments. Silence rode in the wake. No cheers, none left to cheer. Just the faint hiss of fractured steel cooling in drizzle, and the relentless creak of our oarlocks. We slid under drifting smoke plumes, embers railing around like dying meteors. Somewhere up there in that furnace were men we'd eaten biscuits with, cursed radios with, shared pickled onions with. Their statues of ash now guarded a bridge no longer fit for war or peace. Our hull scraped mud. Poles leapt, pulling craft onto shingle. I stepped out, boots sinking, legs shaking sudden with release. Hewitt followed, clasped my shoulder, eyes red but dry. Overhead the night sky returned, stars blinking shy behind angry smoke, indifferent witnesses. On the shoreline, medics guided us into orchard shadows. Someone thrust a canteen. I drank deep, water glorious, untainted by soot. In distance, another dull blast marked final charges. Frost, maybe, finishing the span before plunging after. Whether he reached water, we could not tell. Rumors would sort his fate by dawn. Behind us, Arnhem Bridge burned like a broken crown, reflection quivering in river, as though uncertain whether to keep the memory. We stood, silhouettes among apple trees, too weary for words, listening to far-off German engines revving in frustration, and to closer whispers, tallying names missing. Around my neck the dog tags felt heavier, tethered to ghosts. I realized the war had given us no victory tonight, only permission to survive, minus the price of abandonment. The wounded boy with the splinted legs, the padre, the Bren gunner with no name, all currency spent. The ether stayed silent, but rumors had become truth. We were clear of the bridge, ferried by strangers who spoke in consonants,
and whatever came next would be written on another page, soaked but unturned. Somewhere upriver more boats clacked, still ferrying survivors out of the glare. Our guide signaled deeper into the orchard. Quiet now. Keep low. We obeyed, boots muffled in wet grass. As we moved, the Rhine washed against stones behind us, steady, patient, as if erasing tracks of those both saved and left behind. A bitter wind carried the smell of burnt paint and river silt. I tasted it and knew it would cling forever, a reminder of the night we paddled from fire into uncertain dark, carrying nothing but hollow rifles and heavier hearts. A pale gray washed across the eastern sky as we threaded deeper among the apple trees, the earlier blaze behind us shrinking to a dull ember. The poles kept us moving, single file, rifles low, boots whispering through wet grass and fallen fruit. Every so often, one of them pointed a finger to lips, then to the river. German search flares lofted and fell, burning out with a sigh that carried over the water like spent hope. We paused after each bloom until darkness restitched itself around us. The silence felt enormous, broken only by the squelch of mud and the soft pop of apples under heel. We reached a drainage ditch lined with reeds. Waiting there, a new line of canvas boats, crews bent double with fatigue, yet still whispering, "Shipgo, shipgo." Fresh groups of our lads trickled from the river path, gaunt silhouettes emerging as though the earth itself was surrendering its wounded. They slumped beside us, eyes hollow, uniforms stiff with soot. No one asked names. Faces told the story well enough. If you'd come this far, you belonged. A captain, Polish eagles on his forage cap, unfolded a map by the glow of a hooded lamp. His English was clipped, precise. Here, south, 1 mile, small dike road, rendezvous with British armor, if armor comes. His shrug carried lashes of humorless irony. He jabbed another spot. Dutch farm, field hospital. You go there first. Drink, dress wounds, wait for lorries. Understand? Heads nodded. No one dared request guarantees. We loaded again, this time cramming 15 men where 10 belonged. Careful hands packed casualties across thwarts like fragile cargo. I squeezed between gunwale and radio operator, still clutching the Sept, though batteries were dead. He'd become a pilgrim, guarding a holy relic nobody believed in any longer. Hewitt perched opposite, boots dangling in water that seeped up through bullet holes, soaking socks in an icy embrace. A push, a scrape, then we glided. The oars dipped without sound, blades feathering perfectly in the glassy current. Around us, nothing but the hiss of dew on silk leaves, the far thud of sporadic artillery, and the faint moan of girders cooling behind Arnhem's black silhouette. No one spoke. Breath showed in thin plumes, rising like prayers into the half-light. Midstream, the ruined bridge came into view again, lopsided against the paling sky. Flames had ebbed to glows, but steel still sparked like coals in a grate. I could picture Frost somewhere in that wreckage, maybe washed against a pier, maybe dredged onto a bank as the river sorted the living from the rest. I wanted to look away, yet kept staring, unwilling to grant the enemy the last glance. Moonlight, hazed by smoke, glinted on twisted spans. For a heartbeat, the broken bridge resembled a rib cage, torn open, organs spilled, a fitting marker for what Market Garden had become. A body that breathed promise and died, clutching it. Oars creaked, too loud. A Polish sergeant hissed and we froze, each ripple amplifying into imagined alarm. Searchlights swept, but farther north they grazed rooftops, still wrapped in dawn mist, then shut off. I exhaled, heart easing from my throat back to its cage. The south bank rose suddenly, high mud wall topped with willow. Hands reached down, pulling us one by one. Feet landed on foreign earth that felt treacherously solid. I found myself shaking, delayed reaction perhaps, but the ground wobbled as if still afloat. A field ambulance waited, its headlights hooded, engine idling with a soft stutter. Stretcher parties loaded the worst cases. For the rest, there were thermos flasks of weak tea ladled into mess tins, one swallow each, warmth trickling through bodies chilled by water and terror. I cradled mine, sipping slow. The taste, smoky, metallic, brought a lump to my throat larger than the liquid deserved.
Another survivor stumbled up. The bandage over his eyes was soaked dark. He whispered my name, recognized my voice, and gripped my arm until nails bit skin. I guided him to a stump, helped him drink. His hands trembled violently, tin rattling against teeth. When he finished, he smiled, an inexplicable, gentle smile, and muttered, "Thought I'd dreamt you." That broke something in me. I had to turn away, blinking hard at the ground where worms wriggled clear of soaked soil. Dawn proper arrived, colorless and honest. It revealed us as scarecrows, webbing hanging in tatters, faces streaked black and gray, helmets dented or missing. The Poles moved among us, offering chunks of bread gone rock hard, slice of sausage if you were lucky. I chewed a piece until taste returned, faint pork and pepper mingling with ash on my gums. A major from 30th Corps appeared, battle dress crisp by comparison, though mud streaked his boots. He took a quick tally, scribbled numbers on a clipboard. Survivors, not platoons now, but handfuls. He spoke with forced cheer. Trucks inbound. You'll be safe behind lines by midday. The word safe felt alien. He may as well have said unicorn. Some muttered thanks, many stayed mute, eyes fixed on middle distance where the bridge still smoldered. A wiry Dutch civilian approached, cap clutched to chest. He offered cigarettes, roll-ups smelling of hay. I took one, passed it to the radio operator, whose fingers fluttered like moth wings around the paper. He struck a match, the flame reflected in his eyes before smoke veiled them. An engine roar grew beyond the dikes. Shermans at last. Tracks clattering over metal grates. Too late, I thought, but the bitterness came out flat, as though another voice said it. The tanks lumbered past toward the riverbank, still within German range. I watched them go. Thunderous and invincible now that the cost was paid. One gunner waved. I lifted a finger in reply, couldn't manage more. Rain returned in a gentle curtain. Drops merged with sweat, washing rivulets of soot down my sleeves. The orchard's leaves shivered, releasing silver beads onto our helmets. Somewhere, a lorry backfired, a startling crack that sent several lads ducking before nerves caught up with reason. Laughter followed, brittle and brief, then silence reclaimed us. We filed toward waiting trucks, open backs lined with blankets and straw. Boards creaked under boots. The smell of diesel, wet canvas, and horse feed mingled. I chose a corner, leaned against timber stanchion, muscles surrendering at last. Hewitt climbed beside, boots thumping, then slumped, wordless. He offered half a chocolate bar found in some pocket. I shook my head. He shoved it into my hand anyway, then rested his chin on chest, eyes closing before the engine even coughed alive. Through slats, I glimpsed the river one final time. Smoke still coiled above the bridge ruins, drifting into a sky now brushed with pink. On that far shore, somewhere within that blur of rubble and flame, were men waiting to be listed missing, villages waiting to be liberated a second time, promises waiting to be rewritten. The lorry jolted forward. The scene slid away, swallowed by orchard trunks.
As we bumped along muddy lanes, rumors tried to rise. Somebody whispered that relief columns would recross, that the operation merely paused, that Arnhem hadn't been for nothing. The words found no purchase. Static-ridden hope had been our companion for 6 days. Now we'd traded it for a vacancy too wide to fill. Even the radio operator seemed done chasing signals. The Sept lay beside him, aerial bent, looking like a broken insect. An hour later, the convoy halted at a field hospital sprawled inside a bombed sugar factory. Corrugated roofs gaped like broken tin smiles. Inside, cots stretched between vats and conveyor belts. Doctors in rolled-up sleeves moved briskly, faces smeared with grease. We dismounted into a blur of antiseptic and low electric buzz. Generators powering bare bulbs that flicked whenever artillery thumped in the distance. A nurse guided me to a chair, cut away my sleeve where a graze festered purple. She dabbed iodine, burning fire that jerked me fully awake. Seeing the twitch, she murmured apology in a soft accent, Scottish, comforting in its familiarity. I smiled weakly, felt tears prick, hid them by staring at a cracked gauge on an idle boiler that still read normal pressure, as if the factory cared nothing for war. Behind a ragged curtain, someone cried for morphine. Another voice, calm, replied there was none till next shipment. The cry subsided into exhausted sobs. My stomach lurched. Sound transported me to the cafe cellar, to the lad with splinted legs we'd left. I pictured his face when I lied, felt bile rise. The nurse noticed, handed a basin just in time. I retched nothing but the taste of river and guilt. When the wave passed, she pressed water on me. The enamel mug, clean, unchipped, gleamed under bulb light. I sipped. No grit, no ash. It tasted impossibly of nothing, and that nothing felt like mercy.
Outside the factory doors, an officer mounted a crate, reading names for debrief. Some answered, voices thin. Some remained silent. Many names hung unanswered, echoing under corrugated arches until clipped off the list. Each gap felt like a hole punched in the roof, letting rain of regret trickle through. My turn came. I stood, spoke rank, serial, unit. The officer's pen paused. Bridge detail, A Company? I nodded. He ticked a column labeled extracted, no column for worth it, none for left behind. Debrief moved on, leaving me with a paper tag wired to my buttonhole. Evac, exhaustion. Accurate enough. I slumped back, eyelids heavy, the factory's hum blending with distant artillery, thumps now half comforting, proof the front still existed beyond my failures. As twilight fell, the ward lights dimmed to save fuel. Shapes settled on cots like shadows folding. I watched smoke from a brazier swirl up into rafters, mingle with dusk seeping through bullet holes. For a time, I drifted in that haze, hearing only rain patter on tin, occasional coughs, boots crunching cinder outside. Somewhere close, a portable radio crackled. New batteries, lively signal. A newsreader's clipped tones reported fierce but locally successful operations across the Netherlands, strategic bridges secured, enemy resistance stiff. No mention of abandonment, of boats in the night, of frost-rimmed dog tags still strung on shattered parapets. Truth, apparently, would sleep rough till morning. I closed my eyes, but the bridge remained, a scar of twisted steel glowing on the backs of eyelids, water slapping stone, broken glass crunching under boots, whispered orders swirling in drizzle. Sleep kept its distance, so I lay awake, counting breaths, counting heartbeats, counting the spaces left by friends not here to steal blankets or mutter jokes. Eventually, fatigue dragged me under. In the drift between waking and dream, I felt the lorries rumble again, smelled river silt, heard frost's whistle echoing across iron and rain. The sound faded slowly, replaced by a hush so complete it felt like snow. Morning would come soon, with fresh orders, fresh rumors, but none of them could change the simple ledger scratched behind my eyes. Arnhem Bridge lost, brothers scattered, courage spent like brass casings on cobblestones. We had paddled to safety, yes, yet the river behind carried more than wreckage. It bore the weight of promises unkept. In that knowledge, sleep finally found me, fitful, shallow, haunted, while rain drummed soft forgiveness on the factory roof, and the Rhine whispered its endless, indifferent lullaby beyond the dark fields of a country we'd sworn to liberate.